Hello and welcome to the Reasonably Unreasonable podcast. I am one of your hosts, Noah Ocean Neeson. I'm an author, poet, U.S. Army veteran, and cowboy from Rough and Ready. Joining me today are
My name's Brian. I'm a Christian and uh, aspiring psychologist.
All right, I'm Alex. I'm also a Christian, uh, finance bro, author, podcaster, all around gentleman, fly fisherman, everything, all the things. That's me.
very cool. Alrighty, tonight I have a little poem that I wrote to kick us off. So, fun fact about this one, it is a palindrome, um, which make of that what you will. Um, all right, it is called Know Nothing. Know nothing. As the gates of materiality dissolve and fade away, know nothing. Because at the end of the day, that is all that can be known. The highest gnosis is the lack thereof. What multitudes nothingness contains. How many infinities are held and beheld within the vast array of nothing. Everything flows from nothing, and to nothing we shall all return. The existential longing, back into union we all yearn. How does one fit the ocean into a hole in the sand, draining the abyss into the void and the void into nothing? I am nothing. No thing. No thing. That you are nothing. What limit to that which is nothing? What box can contain? Even the most empty of vessels is overflowing. Make room for nothing. Beyond knowledge, beyond good or evil, beyond transcendence, beyond descendants. Unfathomable is the depth of nothing. Even in fleeting perception of nothing, something emerges. How can be known that which cannot be known? Superordination of the most ordinate. Higher than high, lower than low, wider than east from west. The fool clings to what he knows. The holy fool falls into that which is unknowable. And yet we are all fools, in realization or knowledge of our lack of, or lacking in such epiphany. All are unified in knowledge of nothing. What lies at the bottom of the well of souls? What precursors to that which is? What shall remain after annihilation? That which is not. That which is not is. Beyond multiplicity, beyond duality, beyond monality, beyond neutrality, beyond neurality, beyond such scattered tongues and collective ideals, perpetually imperpetual, the great nothing is I am. Oh, am I is, the great nothing, in perpetually perpetual, beyond such scattered tongues and collective ideals, neutrality beyond, neurality beyond, monality beyond, duality beyond, multiplicity beyond, that which is not is, that which is not. What shall remain after annihilation? What precursors to that which is? What lies at the bottom of the well of souls? In knowledge of nothing, all are unified. In realization or knowledge of our lack of, or in lacking in such epiphany. And yet we are all fools. The holy fool falls into that which is unknowable. The fool clings to what he knows. Wider than east from west, lower than low, higher than high, superordination of the most ordinate. How can be known that which cannot be known? Even in fleeting perception of nothing, something emerges. Unfathomable is the depths of nothing. Beyond transcendence, beyond descendants, beyond good or evil, beyond knowledge. Make room for nothing. Even the most empty of vessels is overflowing. What box can contain? What is limit to that which is nothing? That you are no thing, no thing, no thing, nothing I am. Draining the abyss into the void and the void into nothing? How does one fit the ocean into the hole in the sand? Back into union we all yearn, the existential longing, and to nothing we shall all return. Everything flows from nothing. How many infinities are held and beheld in the vast array of nothing? What multitudes nothingness contains. The highest gnosis is the lack thereof. Because at the end of the day, that is all that can be known. Know nothing. As the gates of materiality dissolve and fade away, know nothing.
Bravo. That was beautiful.
Well, thank you.
That was beautiful. Now, I have to, if I may respond, this is a podcast after all.
That's kind of why we're here.
Is that was beautiful, because so often when I encounter what people often refer to as nihilism, there's an obvious agenda behind it. Which is someone who...
Could you not see the obvious agenda behind mine?
Well, that's a tricky question. Well, the thing about Christian faith is that it's a very strange agenda. And faith is also a pursuit of the unknown. And what you just read was so peaceful, because it's like, just let it go. We don't know. We gotta let this go. Eventually we all do. And that was a beautiful ode to letting go. When I hear from nihilists, it's so clear that their agenda is very satanic. But I know the difference between Satanism and something else, and that was something else. So I really enjoyed that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. How about you?
Nothingness is an interesting concept.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote that because, in my humble opinion, there is nothing within language adequate to describe what God actually is and how his totality is in contrast to us.
And when you use the word totality in contrast with the word nothing, you invoke the idea that they're, unto us, might as well be equal, identical, and yet opposite. We're so far from understanding that which is infinite, or that which is infinitely non-existent, or that which is infinitely existent. So,
or that which is simultaneously.
Precisely.
And also neither. And all four.
Precisely. And we can make extrapolations. Like I was complaining in my own head this week about the heat death of the universe, and how it's like we can talk about that, but it's like that bothers me, because it's like, if we are going to talk about that, I'd like to do it in the way that a lot of those guys like Robert Antoine Wilson does.
I love Robert Anton Wilson.
Like, if we're going to talk about the heat death of the universe, let's just go all the way friggin' crazy into Crazyville, where nothing makes sense. And, like, let's not have some kind of scientific doctrine of our own, of infinite demise. It's not that that's not necessarily true. It's that when we shine the light of our attention on that, the effect that has is satanic.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that it's not true that theoretically the universe will die of a heat death in 1.5 whatever gajillion, whatever their number is. That's some ridiculous extrapolation. That's obviously the most extremely error-prone number that you could possibly imagine. It's that when you shine your attention on that, you lose something. You lose faith. You lose faith. And it's like, well, why wouldn't I listen to Noah or Robert Antoine Wilson instead of Neil deGrasse Tyson, if both are just going to get me killed, and at least Noah's going to give me peace? But when I go and listen to Neil
I
deGrasse,
wouldn't necessarily promise you peace. I'm much too similar to Robert Anton Wilson to promise you that. But
well,
I would promise you a unique journey in which you
yeah,
discover more about yourself and
yeah,
perhaps have potential to find peace if
yeah,
you so choose to.
right. I
Like
just,
Robert Anton Wilson, I like to use language ontologically to craft the reality that I interact with. And I think that is the basis of what all people do, whether you do it consciously or unconsciously. And the narratives that we assign ourselves to,
I just don't want,
we narrate in real time and bring about. And it's absurd.
yeah.
It's absolutely absurd.
I just don't want to have to feel neurotic. And I want to know that my work is good. And like, a lot of people treat me like I'm the devil wherever I go. And I'm just like, I just don't want to have neuroticism. I want to get married and I want to live a life where I don't have to be neurotic or sick. Like that's what Brian wants, and maybe he's a snake. Maybe Brian wants a bunch of other things, and the second you give him those things, he's gonna take them. Cause yeah, probably will. But also, when push comes to shove, I'm gonna have things like empathy, and I'm gonna have things like reflection, and I'm gonna have things like I'm going to face the exigencies of life with a sense of purpose, such that given the choice between betraying someone and not betraying someone, I will at the very least weigh the decision first. Yeah.
I admire your honesty.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna appoint someone as a governor for a scapegoat, use Brian.
Yeah. What do you mean a governor for a scapegoat? That's a complicated thing that you just said.
Yeah, it was kind of a strange thing to bring up there, Alex.
Yeah, not
No,
sure.
like Machiavelli, his like sort of you're talking about betrayal. Machiavelli's like when you take over a new city, you should appoint someone else to be in charge and then go off and continue your campaign. So then like when you come back and this guy's like done heinous things to pacify the region, you just go, "What? I didn't tell you to do this." And then you get him.
Okay, I'm familiar actually. I'm familiar with that exact. Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah. That's hilarious. Okay, so Machiavelli actually said that.
Yeah, I wrote it down in a book. It's called The Prince.
Right.
So
I
that's a
forgot
good
about
book.
the Prince. It's been a while.
Yeah. You should listen to it, read it. It's a good book.
Alex is just out here openly promoting Machiavellianism.
Yeah. Yeah, so we got nihilism, Machiavellianism, and
Hey, I am not a nihilist. Thank you very much. Don't
Hey.
compare me to those
Well, okay, Machiavellianism is
nihilists.
only like it only works if you're the leader of a country and that's what you're using to run your country. And isn't that not what they just do right now anyway? So
I mean, we're kind of turning into a bro-oligarchy right now.
Yeah.
oh, dude, that'd be fucking sick, bro.
Yeah.
The finance bros in charge.
I don't know if putting the finance bros in charge would be a great idea, Alex.
I love how Elon Musk is
okay.
I love how Elon Musk is literally standing next to the Oval Office, like for every one of like this is some shit out of yeah, like on his shoulder, like this is something out of like Sharia law or something, and he's like just standing there next to the Oval Office. He's like just standing there all the
He
time.
looks like a character from The Matrix
Yeah.
with like a baseball cap.
But I think it's cool because the executive branch is balanced by the other two branches. And like, if the executive branch was, I mean, it was screwed up before. I guess it's okay if we have some change, man. Because that's the most screwed up branch of our government, don't you think? I mean, no, you probably have
Change
opinions.
is
What
the only
change if we?
constant. Change is the only constant.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm the only true libertarian. Underneath all these wretched clothes, I'm actually a nudist. And until the day I am free to walk naked through the streets, as naked as I please, this is not actually a free country, so people can stop pretending like it is.
I don't pretend.
I'm not
no,
saying
dude,
you-
we're a
you two-
we're a one-party state that's moving towards one way and one way only.
Hey man, you have the left, you have the right. Together that fucking eagle flies, man. We either have to change our bird.
Yeah,
or...
but it's not really a left or a right. It's just the CIA run by the Mossad.
Hey man, the left and the right flying together. Birds
Under
of
the
a
Star
feather.
of David and the Lion of Judah.
yeah. Well, I actually did. I
Brown
wanted
and
to.
I were both born under the Lion of Judah, astrologically speaking, if you follow the Maseroth.
What is the Lion of Judah?
It's a
Christ our
lion,
Lord. I mean, the Lion of Judah, but in the Maseroth, there's a lion in the sky that generally represents the tribe of Judah in the Maseroth, which is Jewish astrology.
I think a lion is such a proud and beautiful animal and so dangerous, and they're so enormous, and they literally just kill. They literally
Yeah,
just
sleep.
kill. Yeah.
They kill and sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
like lions.
carefree.
Lions are pretty cool.
Yeah.
And if there were no lions, then the Serengeti would just be so overrun with wildebeests and zebras that it would be like World War Z out there. So really, it's population control. It's extreme.
There's hyenas, there's
Yeah.
cheetahs, there's jaguars, there's
They
feral
don't have
African
jaguars
dogs.
in Africa.
They don't.
It's not jaguars in Africa. What am I thinking of?
Leopards.
Leopards. That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
They're like the
African
same thing,
jaguar.
though.
Yeah.
They're like the same thing.
Yeah.
Pretty
They have
much the
other big
same
cats.
thing.
Hippos.
Leopards, panthers, mountain lions, jaguars, they're all the same thing.
Well, what's interesting about mankind is that we are omnivores, and we like and we are predators, and we kill to eat, and killing is part of our history so deeply, and yet in modernity killing is becoming more and more frowned upon in any circumstance, whether that be warfare or civil killing. We don't sacrifice sheep like the ancient Jews did.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would be satanic and barbaric. So, you know.
Yeah. You oh, that's an interesting claim. That would be, yeah, if I had a bunch of sheep and I went outside and killed one of my sheep just for a sacrifice, I just slit its throat.
Yep.
And then I burned it on an altar to Yahweh. That would be satanic?
Yep.
That would be satanic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Even if you said you were doing it to the same God that I worship, you wouldn't be doing it to the same God that I worship, because God doesn't take sacrifices anymore.
Right.
What do you think sacrifice is?
Yeah.
Well, when I'm talking about sacrifice and what he was talking about were animal sacrifices, right?
I suppose so. Yeah, we were talking about animal sacrifice.
Right. We were talking about animal blood sacrifices, which
and
is
you're
like
saying
what?
that's demonic.
Okay.
That's demonic
So,
in the modern age.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think
I'm
even the
just
idea
curious
behind
about
it,
what
I
you-
think even
what
the
you meant
idea
by it.
behind it's demonic and illustrates a reason why Christ needed to come back in the first place.
Whoa.
I mean, like the idea that you can transfer your sin onto a other animal, another creature, something other than yourself. These are free decisions that you have, that you have as an individual. The idea that you can transfer that onto something that actually has no will of its own, like a chicken or a sheep or something, and then kill that is to clean yourself of your sins. That's barbaric. It's how could you do that? You think you can fool God?
That's
Satanic.
that's
I mean, God
provocative.
kind of explicitly states on how to do that throughout the Torah, and it's also not the only practice that they did.
Yeah, no, well, now it is though. Like I don't think you can do it anymore. Like there
So,
once
yeah,
was
I know,
a
I would agree
way
with that.
to do
There's
it,
no more temple.
but God fulfilled that already through Christ.
Yeah, and then
He
that's what
fulfilled all the
taking.
promises of the Torah, everything, all the rules that you had to do in the Torah. All of that's fulfilled through Christ. Adherence through an old archaic system is you're not following the way that Christ showed us. Not follow, simple. If you're not following that way, what way are you following? That's it.
Wow.
I know it's crazy. I might be like the only one who thinks that, but
That's
if you're
actually
not following the way, what way are you following?
the way, the truth, and the life. Okay, okay.
Yeah,
And that's interesting because that gets back into that old argument between uh
and it used to be that old ancient Hebrew way where
yeah,
you could do animal sacrifices, but now it's not that way.
right. And
Yeah,
and so okay, that's so interesting. Yeah, because in Leviticus 17, chapter 17, it says, "The life of an animal is in its blood." And there it prohibits the eating of blood. It prohibits the eating of blood as if that was a problem. And it doesn't say drinking blood. It says people were eating blood.
yeah,
Because drinking blood, you
yeah,
get this notion that they have blood in a glass and they're like drinking the blood. But
yeah.
when Leviticus
No,
says eating blood, you get the sense that they were like tearing out the innards of an animal and eating it raw. That's the
no,
image
no. Well,
to me that Leviticus is
yeah.
putting forward.
Well,
Like that
what
they
it
were doing
is they take
demonic.
the blood and they use that as an ingredient for something. Like instead of using water or something to make a bread, you'd use the blood, and
Okay.
that'd be a very nutrient rich, iron rich form of of getting it's pretty protein dense
But
thing. Yeah, you
quite a
can
lot of
do that
people
now. You can
eat
do that
blood
now as a
for religion.
Christian. Yeah, that's something you could do. We can eat
What's
blood now, like
what's
a blood
Peter's
sausage.
ruling on
Huh?
raw deer heart
Yeah,
upon
well, he
hunting?
probably ate one. Who knows what he ate? We just know that what he ate was considered unclean, which was a whole manner of things to the Jews.
I like to think he just reached down and picked up a
Yeah.
guinea pig and just ate it alive.
I like to think that he had, a double bacon cheeseburger or a double chili, cheeseburger where the chili's made out of pork. Um, I mean, there's just yeah,
What
the whole
passage are you guys referencing? So Peter ate something unclean? I've not heard of this.
yeah.
What
You haven't
passage?
heard of like
No,
all of
this
the
would be Paul. This would
This
be
was
Paul,
Paul?
right?
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
Paul.
Wait. What's the context? Where does it say this? I've never heard of this.
Uh,
Is it
yeah,
in
I
the
don't
book
know.
of
I think it's
Acts?
in Acts.
It's in
Yeah, I think
Acts?
Yeah, I
so.
want
It's
to say
it's
Acts.
because he's lost on the road to Damascus, right? He's lost for like 40 days. I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know.
And he eats something unclean.
Somewhere he's stranded somewhere and he's like hungry and God shows him. He's like, "Hey, go and eat, Paul." And
I
he's like,
can
"What? I can't eat any of this. It's unclean." And he's like, "You dare say anything that God have shown you is unclean, dick?" And Paul has
oh
to eat the food.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, I confess
Lizards, guinea
that's
pigs,
so metal.
goats.
That is so
Yeah.
metal. So I confess uh the way I read the
I don't know
Bible,
exactly where it is.
the way I read the Bible is that I skip around, and you know, and that really works for me because it allows me to synthesize better. So so my understanding of the text is very strong and complete, but sometimes there are things that you can surprise me with, because I just don't want to sit down and read the book of Judges from chapter 1 to chapter 32. I like to skip around. I like to read, okay, I'm going to read a chapter of Judges, and then I'll go and read a chapter of Acts, and then I'll go and read a chapter of 1 Samuel or whatever. But that's interesting.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I think that you should read the Bible as much as you want, but I mean, a lot of the air comes in when you start going like, oh, well, I understand this to a degree where I think I can interpret it and tell people what's Christian, what's not Christian. It's like you don't know, unless I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty novice at it. We've got 2,000 years of church history, and a lot of people, what if one of the apostles has a different opinion than you? You know better than Paul, type stuff. Not you specifically, but just a lot of people, or maybe like if they said something that was like contrary to what Polycarp thought, which I don't really entirely know what Polycarp thought, but he was like essentially the theological grandchild of the apostles, pretty much. Like his teacher was a disciple of the disciples.
I'm getting Godfather vibes from you right now. So hard. You're like, what?
Yeah, I wore a do-rag today.
Kind of some gangster vibes.
Yeah, that was very gangster. That's a nice vest.
Solid vest.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I like the blue tie works with it very well.
Thank you.
You just need a cigar when you say that. Like, you think you know better than Paul the Apostle?
Paul.
Put up this cigar. So there's this show on Netflix called Blood of Zeus, and there's a character in Blood of Zeus who turns into a demon. Oh, that's so baller.
Nice, cool for him.
A Greek demon or like a Christian demon?
They portray it as a Greek demon, but it's clear that they're just doing whatever they want in that little series. But it was very interesting. He eats the flesh of a dead titan. Because
nice, good for him.
In Blood of Zeus, the gods kill the titans, and he finds one. And I think Hades, the god of the underworld, tricks him into eating the flesh of a dead titan, and it instantly turns him into a horrible demon. But he's super powerful, and he's a demon so powerful that he has this spear that he can throw and retract, and he just goes around just massacring innocent people, right?
Nice.
And that reminded
I do the same thing.
That reminded me of what you're saying about eating unclean things, but I felt like that series was so cool because it was saturated with Greek imagery, and it really, really sparked my imagination as to the degree to which the New Testament is so saturated with Greek references. For example, in the book of Acts, Paul and Barnabas go to a city together, and it's in Greece. And it's this notable city. I forget what it's called, but it's referenced. And they think Barnabas is Zeus in human form. And they think Paul is Apollo in human form. And it explicitly says this in the book of Acts. They thought Barnabas was Zeus. And they all started freaking out. Because they're like, you guys are gods. And just imagine how embarrassed they would be. And that's what's so interesting. Like, you would be tempted to be like, yeah, we are. Like, imagine,
Well, I feel like might have played into it a little bit. He definitely carries some of that, like, wild card energy where he's like, I'm gonna fuck with them.
Yeah, he's like, I've been persecuted so bad. You know what? Let's have a little fun. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you guys heard the conspiracy theory that Christianity is a Jewish psyop?
I haven't dug into that one much, but I have heard through my network of my own conspiracy theory and potential internet cult that I accidentally created at one time. Heard about that.
I mean, I don't believe it, but it's one that exists.
Yeah. I mean, it is. We kind of got into this last episode, but it is kind of a unfurling of Second Temple Pharisaical Judaism into what it
Well,
is.
no, that's what Judaism is today.
I wouldn't necessarily say that modern day Judaism is necessarily congruent or the same thing as Second Temple Pharisaism.
Well, okay. What do you mean by Second Temple Pharisaism? Because when I think of that, I'm thinking the Pharisees at the time of Jesus Christ,
Who were of the Pharisaical branch of Judaism as opposed to
yeah,
the Essenes or the
yeah. So you're right. By the time the Pharisees are around, the priestly class of the rabbis is you're not the rabbis. Rabbis are the teachers, and they became the keepers of the Torah, right? Because the priestly class died. So I thought like the type of Judaism we have right now is rabbinic Judaism, where they study more the Talmud, right?
Yeah, but the Talmud
Or
didn't exist.
yeah, it didn't exist at the time of Christ.
Yeah,
But it was created by the Pharisees, though.
Yeah, but Christianity is
Later
also
Pharisees.
based out of Pharisaical Judaism. There's some debate
How
as to
so?
Jesus was interacting with Pharisaical Judaic society.
Yeah, I mean,
during the ministry.
yeah,
I mean,
arguably
if
Jesus
make an
was a
argument that
Pharisee.
he was an ascetical descendant, you could.
I mean, he was arguably a Pharisee.
Yeah, he was.
He was going and meeting with the Pharisees at the time that they met at temple, every time that they met at temple, and was interacting with the Pharisees in debate. Like,
Yes.
Isn't that right? Was he not doing that? Okay,
Yes,
so he's a Pharisee.
Yeah,
But that
that's why I
doesn't
would
mean
say
that
that
we follow
Christianity-
the same thing, that like that we're essentially the same sort of thing.
I didn't say
It's the
that. I said that
Pharisees.
Christianity is an unfurling of Second Temple Pharisaical Judaism
Okay.
into
Yeah,
what
I'm trying to ask questions. I'm trying to understand, right? Okay. All right.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to I don't want to like I'm just trying to ask questions.
Oh, it's so fucking come at me, man.
Yeah, I'm not trying to come at you. I'm just trying to,
No, I'm
ask
just kidding.
questions.
No, I don't mind.
I don't really. I'd never heard that before.
Yeah.
But I'm only.
I mean,
it kind of makes sense. Yeah.
I've heard some arguments that Christianity, if properly practiced, is more ascetical than pharisaical. But you'd be hard pressed. I don't think that would fall in line with like Orthodox practices or most mainstream acceptances of what people who even recognize that Christianity is a unfurling of Second Temple Pharisaicism, as opposed to Sadduceesism or ascetical Judaism.
Who were the Pharisees and the Sadducees in the time of Christ?
So the Pharisees are sort of like, it was a club within a club. So the rabbis are the teachers. The Pharisees was like a subset group of rabbis that believed in like it wasn't like not all the Jews, but it wasn't like, it was like a sect within, it was a sect. It was like a sect of Judaism.
If I'm not mistaken, when Alexander the Great came through, he conquered the region, and on his way to Egypt, he met with a few priests. And after he left, and after he died, that is, after the entirety of his conquest, and he dies, his empire is divided up into, I believe, 4 regions, and that's actually prophesied in the book of Daniel. And the region that the Israel and Judah end up belonging to was the I'm blanking on it. It's the I just had it. The governor is one of Alexander's generals.
Yeah, it's like the Seleucid Empire.
Yeah,
I can't say it. I can see the word.
The Seleucid.
Yeah.
All right, between the three of us, the Seleucid Empire, and so the latest books in the Hebrew Old Testament, at least the one that everyone has in your Bible, the latest books seem to be, if I'm not mistaken, like Ezra and Nehemiah, and they go to the time of when the Persians were in power, and Alexander utterly conquers the Persian Empire, which was an enormous empire, and Alexander the Great conquered the whole thing, and which is amazing because Macedon was so small, and he didn't really have like, if I'm not mistaken, he didn't have southern Greece under his yoke. It was like this was a Macedonian conquest of the entire Persian Empire.
No, they had.
Did they have
had
support
stuff,
from
like,
Athens and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay,
so,
good.
Well,
but still, this was
it
largely
was more than like Macedon. Like Macedon was a pretty good big kingdom.
It was
like,
well sized. Yes.
Alexander the Great. Yeah.
Yes.
It was like they
And
had pretty much controlled over. He had control. Like Philip had control over a lot of it. And then he kind of when he died, he sort of like handed over the reins. Like it's like he got a good start. Like he got a good kingdom.
He did.
Alexander the Great. I mean, it's nothing compared to the Persians.
And the book of Philippians is actually referencing Alexander's father, King Philip of Macedon. So Philippi, where Paul visits. So that's what's important about Alexander, is that with him, the Bible goes, the attention of the Bible shifts, because so much of the Old Testament, it's like, and curse Egypt, and curse Edom, and curse the Babylonians, and it's all, they're thinking south and they're thinking east. They almost never look north. Alexander,
Edom
Edom is south.
Rome.
Oh,
that's what they call Rome, isn't it?
Oh, Edom is south of Judah. It's southeast of Judah. Yeah, but anyways, and so if I'm not mistaken, you have the books of the Maccabees, which are not part of the Bible, but they're important because at that time there's this dark spot of the Bible in between the latest books of the Old Testament and the book of Matthew when Christ is born. There's like a 400-year gap where the Bible is not present, and the Maccabees 1 and Maccabees 2 writes about that time period. And in the books of the Maccabees, we learn about...
why that is, though, right?
Why?
You know why that is? Like, the Jews had forsaken God, and they turned the temple into a fucking whorehouse, and they literally lost the Torah in debris in the fucking whorehouse. That's why they lost it.
There's lots of Second Temple.
That's why they lost it.
Yeah.
There's lots of Second Temple literature that they have that spans that gap.
Are you sure they didn't have...
Like God had to come down and redeem the human race.
Are you sure they didn't have more than one copy of the Torah extant in existence at that time, or did they just lose the... So the temple... the temple itself was a whorehouse. And the
temple itself was converted into a whorehouse.
And the master copy,
the physical Torah,
and the master copy,
they had, just like how we only had one. Like
it, like fell.
You realize
it fell down.
That's not like an odd thing. That was the case in Christianity too for like 300 years.
When?
For 300 years after the time of Christ, like all the Gospels, not everyone had, like, the Bible didn't exist, and one church would have maybe one of Paul's letters, and another church would have like Matthew's gospel, like his last church that Matthew's church would have Matthew's gospel, and if you were lucky you got to read it. If you were a priest, if you were lucky, maybe you got to transcribe a little bit, you got to remember some and write some down and take it with you to your church. But I mean, no, that was the case in Christianity too, and the people who were entrusted to keep the Torah, they desecrated it. They literally lost it in the rubble of their filth.
Well, I'm glad we're talking about this, because when you talk to other people, you get a good understanding of everything you've read, and everything that you've read that you actually didn't understand the context of. Because people can be well read. It's not until you get into conversation that you start to visit all the most important footnotes. And when I am thinking about the Pharisees and the Sadducees, I have a New Testament understanding, but I don't know where they came from. And what it seems to be, from my very few studies into them, is that they were in the pockets of the Greeks. So Alexander started building temples in Israel and Judah. There were Greek gymnasiums, Greek universities, there was Hellenism, and there was Greek temples to Greek gods in Israel and Judah. And they had military power over the region, the Seleucids, that is. So Israel and Judah became subjugated to a Greek empire, and then the Romans came in, and I believe the Romans took it from the Seleucids or something.
Yeah, they took it from them and the Egyptians and stuff.
Right, and
the Seleucids and the Egyptians fought each other, which was another successor kingdom of Alexander.
Oh, really? Okay,
the Ptolemies.
The Ptolemies. Yeah. So, but that's important. That's really important, because this chapter of history was so pivotal right before Christ, because so much of that culture was starting to mix, and so the Romans take it, but there was still so much Greek influence on the region, and I do believe that the Pharisees and the Sadducees,
except for the kid diddling, it was a good thing.
I believe the Pharisees and the Sadducees were they were loyal to Greek powers. That's so important, because there was still a remnant of Jewish rabbis, of synagogues. The Maccabees were actually a rebellious unit of fighters who wanted to rebel against Seleucid rule, if I'm recalling that right.
Yeah.
And so
this is all very familiar too.
Yeah, and so the Pharisees and the Sadducees
throughout Jewish history,
they're like these Greeks. They're like, it's like they're in the New Testament. They're obviously posers, but then Christ in the New Testament will say things like, "And doesn't your law say this? And doesn't your law say that?"
No, it's the same people.
Like, but when he's talking to Peter, he's going,
at the time of Christ, though,
yeah,
are those people's descendants. Those are the people that are following that tradition. Those are the same Pharisees. It was because of those Pharisees that Christ had to come back.
Right, but they turned.
No, they were always like that. They didn't turn in any way.
They didn't turn.
They were always like that, and the Bible reflects it.
Yeah. Who's they?
We see time and time again the Jews behave much like the way that they were behaving at the time of Christ throughout the Old Testament. And it isn't until that they finally, like, one last time, it's like enough is enough, and then the Jews lose, like, that one last time. The ancient Israelites lose that one last time, and then they go and they're like, repent, and they repent, and then God says, well, I'll deliver you from the hand of the Canaanites, and he sends Nebuchadnezzar. He didn't really deliver the Jews, did he? He put them from under the hand of whoever they were under, put them under the hand of the Babylonians, and then the Babylonians, did what they did. But Nebuchadnezzar was the good guy in this scenario. Nebuchadnezzar, even in the Old Testament, in where it's talking about this, God says through the Jews that God chose Nebuchadnezzar for that God was using Nebuchadnezzar to liberate the Jews because he's done with them. He's done.
Yes, it explicitly says that.
They're chosen, but they're chosen for one thing. They're chosen for one thing, that the Messiah will be born from the line of David. That's what they were chosen for. And Christ fulfilled that already. But no, I mean, that, like, you can't really, I don't think you can really read, like, that's pretty much the story of the Old Testament, is the Jews really, really falling short. They repent, they come down, and then finally God just has enough. And then it's, they're under the yoke of the Persians, they're under the yoke of the Greeks, but they're never Israel again. Israel's dead. And then Christ comes back, and then he shows us the way, because somewhere between the end of the priesthood and Jesus Christ, the way was lost. The way that God showed us was lost to humankind, and Jesus Christ had to come back and show everyone the way so that we could have eternal life with God.
That's so important.
Right? So Yeah, I mean that's the story of the Old Testament. Is there are these people who were the keepers of the way, and they were responsible for being a beacon to everyone, a shining light of Israel, and to show everyone the way. And somewhere along the line, they lost it.
Well, that
And
okay.
we might lose it. We might lose it. We
Well,
might lose the way.
what's
Who knows
important
who's
when Christ comes upon the woman who is caught in adultery, and and there's a crowd around her who's ready to stone her, and they say, it says in the law that if we catch someone in adultery, we can stone them, and Christ says, let he who is without sin be the first one to cast a stone. It's clear to me that the passage is referring to a change, and that change is that the Jews are clinging to their old laws.
Yeah, but who made the laws?
But they were going extinct.
Who made the laws?
But
right?
they were going extinct because of their laws, Alex. They were going extinct because of their laws. So, okay, if your laws are so kick-ass...
And it wasn't the laws that God showed them.
If your laws are so kick-ass, then why didn't you conquer the Greeks? Why didn't you conquer the Persians? Why did Alexander conquer the Persians? God promised in Joshua...
They weren't designed to be a...
Well, their laws were... that was the issue, is their obsession and idea with laws. When you look at Judaism, it's like they follow God, not it's because it's their right, because they belong to the certain tribe. It's their right that they go to heaven. It's not it's not a thing. Like they time and time again believe that Israel is a country that wrestled and beat God. I mean, that's like, yeah. I mean, I spent a lot of time. I've watched a lot of people on YouTube. I've watched some people debate Jews on YouTube, and some of them will just straight up admit to that it's not, that they don't worship the same God as Christians, and it's because they don't. It's a different understanding. I mean, they're literally they're following the same. They're following the rabbinic traditions of the people that rejected Christ. And then, the Bible talks about Jews that, became Christian and stuff. But a lot of those Jews were murdered when the Jews rebelled against the Romans. And the Romans had to, they tore down the temple and defeated the Jews after the time of Christ in one of the Jewish rebellions. So, I mean, these are people that are following they're following the rabbinic traditions of the people that rejected Christ, and they continue to do so. It's it. They reject the Lord. I think that they should repent and become Christians.
Well, what's important about Christ is that he is immersed in a context which is extremely dark. So the Jewish law, it's clear it's suffocating the Jews because they're just getting conquered by everybody. And it's like, wait, these laws are too strict. We get conquered every...
I would say that their lack of adherence to the law is what generally is causing them problems. They receive pretty clear, specific instructions on how to structure their society and how to abide within it, and they consistently fail to do that. And throughout the Old Testament, and then as a result of not faithfully adhering to the very clear set of instructions on how they're supposed to base their society and interact with other societies around them, they get the shit kicked out of them repeatedly.
They do stop.
They, at least in my reading of it, they take a set of spiritual principles and interpret them more and more legalistically throughout the Old Testament. But I don't think it's necessarily supposed to be about the societal legal aspect of it. They kept wanting a legal system so that they could fit in with the culture around them, as opposed to being like aliens in a foreign nation, no matter where they went. And I think because of their desire to be a competitive force in the world, they forsook their actual.
Yeah, it's almost as if they weren't covetous of their neighbors. That
Yeah, it's almost like they failed to adhere to the law that was given to them, and the resulting consequences of failing to uphold the Torah for the Hebrews was that they get pummeled and conquered and devastated, and they allowed the same influences of the world to corrupt them, that they were supposed to be the chosen people to actively fight those on a spiritual level. And so that mantle was lifted from them and then given to the church upon Christ's death and sacrifice, and imbuing the church with the Holy Spirit. And then rather than being the chosen people, I think we're still chosen, but it's more of an ambassadorship that we volunteer for. And so
yeah, I mean, anyone can be part of it.
yeah.
It's not like anyone can be Christian.
Mm-hmm.
It's not,
And
Judaism. It was you had to be a Jew.
Well, I want to say,
no, if you read through the Old Testament, anybody could be brought into the Jewish structure.
Yeah, but they weren't
But
considered Jews.
they weren't. But you could be integrated into Jewish society and participate
Yeah,
with Yahweh. But you had to adhere
but
fully.
you weren't one of them.
No, you weren't one of them, but you could integrate and adhere to their customs, and theoretically, you were supposed to welcome these people in as adopted people
Yeah.
into your tribe. And not that that ever actually happened successfully. There were a number of things that were rather explicitly
Well, I mean,
stated that should play out that didn't happen.
I really think that the Old Testament, I really think it's divinely inspired. Like, there's no if there was the history of my people, I would not write it down. Like, if I
Yeah,
was in charge of keeping history during all of these events that they had to do, I would not write it down. We didn't, yeah, no, I mean, I'd be part of the people trying to cover it up, like, this is not, you don't, unless God's telling you to write this down, you don't really admit to killing an entire city down to the last woman and child and animal,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the atrocities of war across all of humanity have been uncountable. I don't necessarily know if it's fair to hold one particular culture up over another, because I would say, the US probably killed more people in a heartbeat.
Yeah, we do a lot of really bad things. We've done a lot of really bad things as a country, I mean, chief among them, we dropped the atom bomb twice onto civilian centers.
Do you know anything about Unit 731 from Japan, though? The Japanese government was actively doing horrendous things that
they're doing horrible stuff too.
There was not or worse than what Nazi Germany was doing.
Okay, but I don't think that Nazi Germany was doing anything out of the ordinary evil wise at that period of time.
Time out, you guys.
They weren't doing anything different than anyone else.
So the Bible,
and not to the same level of scale that Joseph Stalin did.
The Bible is oriented towards the sacredness of children in such a way that other cultures surrounding them were not. An example is that Moses says, and women. And an example is that Moses says something about, there's some specific passage where it says, if you sacrifice a child, you will be stoned. In the Torah, I can't remember where. And the importance of that is that it implies that other Canaanites were sacrificing children. So it's clear to me. It's clear to me
all over the place.
Yeah, and child sacrifice. Yeah, absolutely. And so likewise, when the conquistadors go to the Aztec country and their practicing human sacrifice. What those conquistadors are bringing from Spain and Portugal is it comes from that Hebrew. I'm going to say it's morality that's oriented towards the sacredness of children, and that does begin with Moses, if I'm not mistaken. So that child sacrifice, and so the sacredness of children, it has to do with what it means to be a child of God. So if in other cultures you have the divine right of kings, you have that in Egypt, and you have that in Babylon, and you have that in Greece. Alexander the Great was considered a child of Zeus or whatever. But when you're a child of God, murder becomes unthinkable because even when I'm 45 years old, I'm a child of God, and you're killing his child when you murder me.
I mean, even no matter how old you are, you still remain somebody else's child, two people's child.
True.
And there is a level of love and connection that, well, most of the time, that parents have towards their children that does not easily just fade. And I think if your parents stay in your life throughout your life, they will always, to some extent, view you as their child, because you'll always be that one that they, held and brought into this world. And like, I know as my children are getting bigger, they're still definitely children, but even interacting with my own parents now, I've recognized that I'm still their child, even though I'm a grown man and have my own children. I'm still their child, and they're their parents' child as well. We're all just children that get bigger, and our bodies grow a little bit, and our experiences stack upon each other, and our range of knowledge grows, and our level of understanding of how data points in our life that we interact with create something that makes sense in our mind to some extent or another.
Okay, and so right, so we're all children, and so imagine this, Noah. Imagine that I told you, maybe I shouldn't say this. Imagine I told you, or imagine that there's a young man, and he gets invited to a party, and it becomes clear to him that there are 3 women who want to sleep with him at this party. But there's also a gay man there who's hitting on him. And everyone's drinking. And he has a decision to make. He says, should I become promiscuous with these women and risk entering into an orgy whereupon I might come into relations with a gay man? Well, that would be extremely compromising. And if you're the father of that young man, hypothetically, then you would say, hell no. But these kind of compromises, there are people who would say yes. And what would we say in our progressive society? Oh, well, he's just gender fluid. Oh, no, he made a deal.
He's fucking gay.
He made a deal with the devil. That's what he did. He made a deal with the devil. And there's nothing more demonic. Really, there's nothing more demonic than sodomy.
Yeah, nothing more demonic than sucking dick.
Than male. Yeah, there's nothing more demonic. Sorry. Nothing.
Yep.
Like murder.
Think of a few things.
Okay, maybe there's right. Maybe we can think of other things. But right.
Think of a few things more demonic than getting railed in the ass. I think it's gross, and I think it is demonic. But I can think of a lot more things that are worse than bending over.
It's pretty fucking bad.
I think as far as morality goes, it's as bad as washing your hands.
It ruins your life. If that happens to you, it doesn't.
Yeah, being gay does ruin your life. You're more likely to get AIDS.
You still have to I
And
mean, a
not
lot
to
of
mention you're gonna need to wear diapers when you're probably in your 60s.
okay, we do have to be careful here because there's a lot of men who make huge mistakes in their life, and if we say your life is over because of that, then those guys
No, your life's not
might
over.
kill
Your
themselves. Yeah,
life's
you
not
still have to
over.
live here. Yeah,
Don't
yeah,
do
yeah.
that.
You still have to live with
Yeah,
yourself.
you still, and there's nothing wrong. Look, I mean, I just said that it's as bad as washing your hands.
What? What are you?
Washing your
What?
Like,
hands.
as far as like things go in morality, like being gay is not a big deal. Like, just try not to fuck dudes.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah,
I would also go as far as to venture, if you're heterosexual, try not to
Try
just
not to fuck women.
fucking around all the time anyway.
yeah.
Like,
Like,
there's
if you're heterosexual, don't fuck women. Like, you should not be having premarital sex.
Yeah.
It's just not something that you should do as a Christian. A lot of people do it. We live in that sort of society. And if you do it, that's whatever. That's your sin. That's between you and God. And, you should repent of that and and seek forgiveness. But that's between you and God. That has nothing to do with me. Has nothing to do with your neighbor. It is nothing. It's, that's, so if you're a homosexual, you're struggling with homosexuality, that just try not to do that. Just if you're Christian and you're a homosexual, go to confession. Try not to do that.
Yeah.
That's it. That's
But
it.
it that
You
I
made a
do
mistake.
wonder. I do wonder how much of the gender stuff that's happened in the last decade or so is
Pushed on by foreign
influenced
countries.
by, well, I won't get that deep in the weeds right now, but I wonder how much of it
No, it is
is
for sure.
social influence
It's
versus
just by
actual,
it's
yeah.
just
'Cause,
by
like,
schools saying that, oh, we don't have a problem with it, and they advertise it at school. It's like, oh, we're an inclusive place, we're a da 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 da, and then pretty soon, the kids are like, they think it's cool to do that shit,
yeah,
because
I'm
it's like
I'm always
they get
conflicted
they're
on
the
it. 'Cause
one.
on one hand, I think people should more or less be able to do whatever they want as long as it doesn't bring
Okay.
physical harm to another person.
I agree to an extent.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's about the only rule that I have for
And
people
if
is
you're
don't
someone
fuck with
that
other people's shit
struggles
and
that
don't look at
way,
other people's bodies. But
yeah, if you're someone
I'm
I think
sorry.
if
I think between consenting adults, they should be able to do what they want.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, that's fine. I mean, my big thing is I don't think that transgender surgeries should be allowed. And that has nothing to do with like a freedom thing. Like, I understand that people feel that way, and I think you should, like, if you want to feel that way, you should feel that way. Okay? It's whatever. That's between you and your creator. It's not my thing. I'm not going to indulge you in it. I'm not that kind of guy. I'm not, never really have been. And I've smoked with somebody who is transgender, by the way, like smoked pot with them in their dorm. Um, but I don't think you should be allowed to mutilate yourself. Like, I don't think that's a freedom you should be allowed to have. Like, you shouldn't. Yeah, my priest was talking about, like, well, what, like, well, tattoos are irreversible. I'm like, yeah, but tattoos are not the same thing
well,
I,
at all.
I want to say, guys, I want to say it's so we talk about consent, we talk about LGBTQ in now it's in schools. As Christians, I think it's important that we remember that yes, this is tolerable, but it can be one of the most evil things under God.
Yeah, well, okay, well, what do you mean by
Especially
tolerable?
because if it's between two consenting adults, you can't legally in our society, you can't bust down someone's door for sodomy anymore.
Yeah.
Because right.
Yeah.
So
And
that
you
is
shouldn't.
and you shouldn't. So that's a form of tolerance, I would
But
say,
you can
under
put
the
societal pressures on, I mean, not necessarily on that, but like, a lot of gay marriage stuff, like, well, the thing isn't really about that. I mean, it just, I don't think that it should be the same tax wise or any of the same benefits, because it's not the same union as between a man and a woman. If they want, if you want to call it marriage, I don't really give a shit.
Right.
But
Well, I think it's
I
important.
don't think that it should have the same benefits or the same incentives. And I think that the heterosexual marriages should be incentivized greater to tax, like in this country, like tax wise and other incentives for heterosexual people to get married and have children.
Okay, that's
You
precisely
know,
right. But just like
so
when Noah used the word social influence, so that I'd like to go there too, because it can get
yeah,
creepy. It can get creepy because if I'm afraid of offending gay people, and then slowly it starts to come out that more and more people around me are
I'm not.
gay, it's like, what if there is a kind of undercurrent of social influence going along, which is actually a temptation from the enemy? That's like, I think as
Well, it
Christians,
probably is.
yeah, as
It
Christians,
probably
we
is.
need to make it clear that a very big part of us condemns that behavior,
Yeah.
because the alternative is that our sons might get raped by men, and it's our
Well, they
responsibility.
might get raped by men already.
It's our
No, I mean
responsibility
that's
in this world to make it clear that, okay, you've got your
I mean, they're more likely to
LGBTQ,
get raped but in school.
you want to put rainbows in classrooms, okay, but we need to make it clear, okay, you are our enemy, and we only tolerate that,
No, wait a
because
minute.
I
They
don't
shouldn't
want
be
that
allowed to put
happening.
rainbows in
I
classrooms.
well, it's I'm saying
The
I
Pride
don't want.
Progress flag, they shouldn't be allowed to hang that in a classroom.
True, true, because you can't
Shouldn't
have
be
a
allowed.
Bible in the damn classroom. Why can you have right? But anyways, I just want to make
Yeah, but I think you should
here's
have a Bible in the classroom.
Alex. The reason why I'm saying this is because I don't want my son to live in that world. And
Yeah, yeah, you're gonna have
somebody
to homeschool him.
someday.
It's honestly,
Well, I'm thinking
the
about.
cold hard truth is you're gonna have to homeschool him, and you're gonna have to get with a community of people if it's in your church or something, and you're gonna have to homeschool him. I'm serious. Unless you can afford to put him in private school, you're gonna have to homeschool him because you can't
or
put him in public school.
or
The public school is not a safe place for children.
well, you need a
It's not.
here. Listen. Often when I talk, I think about the
You could
viewer.
lose your kids in the public school
I know.
ideologically,
Often,
besides losing them in other ways.
but another thing you could do is you could start a podcast, and you could very clearly explain on that podcast that you're against LGBTQ culture, and that in doing so, you voice your opinion and you make it clear to your society where you stand. Once you do that, then other people go, oh, he doesn't like LGBTQ culture because he doesn't want his son to get raped in public school. So the reason why I'm saying this is
I
nobody
also
has
don't
the
want him to turn
balls.
out gay.
Nobody
I
has
don't
the
want them to brainwash him to think he's gay
nobody has the
because that's
balls.
something that they do.
Nobody has the balls to say this right now. Homosexuality
You do, though.
is very dangerous. It's very dangerous. And I don't
Yeah.
want that coming anywhere near
It's
my
almost as
sons.
dangerous as Satanism.
I don't want that coming anywhere near my sons. So that's Brian. That's where Brian stands. Brian doesn't want that
No,
around
it's
his son.
yeah,
Brian doesn't want
yeah,
that in his son's schools. Brian doesn't want his sons to ever have to
yeah.
fear that they're going to get raped because of some evil ideology. And ideology, it's a set of
Yeah. But they
arguments.
might get raped for entirely other reasons,
It's
though.
a set of arguments, true. It's a set of arguments. That's what's so dangerous and scary. It's like they're creeping up on us with, oh, we need your compassion. Oh,
Yeah,
well,
yeah. A lot
well,
of it
it's
is
consent.
like what
Oh,
sort
well,
of situations do you put yourself in, or what kind of what kind of people you hang around,
true.
yeah.
and what sort of access people have to your kids that aren't you.
But
I would
California has
say
been
keep
taken
your
over.
children. I get the fuck out of California, dude.
It's hard.
Yeah, no, I mean,
It's hard.
get out of California, I think is a start, but ultimately, the United you might have to just leave the country. This, the
I,
United States is not a Christian country, and it was at one point in time, and a lot of people say it wasn't, and a lot of people now think it wasn't, and that just might be the cue that you need to just leave. I mean, if history can be revised to the extent that people don't even understand that this was a Christian country, that it was founded by Christians to be a Christian nation, it's like, oh, well, in the First Amendment, there's a separation of church and state. Actually, there's not. It doesn't say that. says that the federal government will make no establishment of a religion. And you have to ask yourself, why did they have that at that time? Because it doesn't say that no state shall not do that. It says the federal government shall not do that. And it's because the states at that time did have their own established religions, and the federal government didn't believe that it had the right to infringe upon the already established religions of the different states, which in some places were Catholic and in some places Protestant, Anglo Protestant. So, you know, that's what it was. But we live in a post-Christian country now, and it's just getting more and more that way. I mean, even Donald Trump, I think he found God in a field like in Pennsylvania. But I mean, up until then, I really didn't think he was too Christian. I didn't buy into it. And even now, I don't really buy into his new administration. It doesn't really seem to be doing much change at all, except for pointing out a bunch of things that the federal government was doing. It seems to be distracting from things that it could be doing.
But we can fix
You
our
know,
country though. And but we have to,
maybe.
don't you think we have to fix it locally? And that's the best way to do that. Start a podcast.
Yeah.
Start
Yeah.
a
Well, I've
podcast.
been in many interviews.
I
I've
want to fix
been
this
in many
country. I don't want to
interviews
leave. I want to fix it.
in this county, and it's going to take a whole lot of effort because, I mean,
I got
this
time.
whole
I got
county,
time.
I mean, there is not every single person, the people that I've had interviews with at the county, they're all freaking liberal, super, super liberal.
It's bad.
I mean, it's run by liberal bureaucrats. The bureaucracy, the whole, it starts,
We were
it's not
born here. We were
100%
born here.
and honest. So,
So we can fix it. We are born
wasn't
we are
no,
born and we are conservative.
when
So as conservatives, we're living
when
proof that our
Noah had
county gave birth to someone
okay, so
good.
Noah was running. Who ran away from Sodom, and his wife
Lot.
turned back?
It
Yeah,
was
when Lot was running
Aaron
away,
and
when
Lot.
they were running away, and didn't he fucking grow up there?
I
No,
thought
Lot didn't grow up
No.
in
All right,
Sodom.
whatever.
He moved to
But
Sodom. He grew up outside of
the
Ur,
idea is the same thing, though. I mean, like Noah. I mean, like he freaking who knows where he landed in proportion to where he started on that ark, land wise. I mean, I don't know. I'm sorry, I already forgot what we were talking about.
I mean, to to fully embrace Christianity, you must strip yourself of nationalism, I think. And
Oh yeah, we were talking about not leaving.
yeah, I in high school, if you guys remember, I was particularly patriotic towards America and fairly had some pretty high national sentiment. And through my time with the military and how that went down, I do my best not to be super jaded about it these days. But I've long held that the United States government is at best highly inefficient at what it's supposed to do, and at worst, it's a global empirical power that has been corrupted. And somewhere in between those two is the proper answer. Um, but I fundamentally lack trust for the federal level of our government. Even with this new administration coming in, I fundamentally lack trust in the federal level of our government. I think if you want to change the political environment, the most efficient way to do it for tangible change would be to figure out what it is that you're actually after and then start grassroots level local movements, which you could do at a scalable model with the internet pretty effectively. For example, one thing that I would like to change is the education in this country, because I do not trust the Department of Education with my children. I do not trust them to instruct them and teach them valuable things with their time. They are humans. They are not little government issued learning machines. They are naturally curious. They have their own interests. They have their own things that they are good at. They have standard things that we'd like to teach them. We're going to teach them English. We're going to teach them how math works. We're going to, history, science, basic level they would have learned in school. But
they have.
Yeah, they're also going to be learning things from.
No, I mean, like that learning model that they have in schools, like it works fine for girls.
It
doesn't work for boys.
It does not work for boys very well.
Like it does work for some girls pretty good, but it doesn't work for boys well at all.
No.
Boys need to be outside.
Yeah, and engaging in physical activity.
Yeah, the studies I think show that like 4 hours in the classroom, the rest of the time outside.
No. Yeah, I mean, like my senior year of high school, I took the first month and a half off of school to go backpacking.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the year I would come in and hang out at school occasionally because I was on independent study. I didn't really do assignments throughout the year. And then the last week of school, I did all of my assignments for the year and graduated. And I learned way more doing that than I did anything else I learned in college or in high school, especially anything I learned that year in high school. I mean, the fact that I was able to even complete a year's worth of assignments with a full class load of like 8 or 9 different classes at high levels is in and of itself a fairly decent achievement. But also shows just how weak our education system is that I was able to conquer it in 3 days. I was disappointed by it. There's mostly stuff I had already learned other places, and it wasn't throughout my entire life, I have never felt satisfied with our education system. And granted, to be fair, I may exist in a category that is slightly above standard intellectual capability, but I've never once felt particularly challenged to study and learn in our education system. I've consistently just felt failed by it and misunderstood on how to effectively learn at a level that was effective for me to learn at.
I think you belong in the wild. You belong in the wild.
Yeah.
And when I say the wild, that can be the concrete jungle or that can be the actual wilderness. But I think a systematic and industrialized cohort of students sitting in square desks listening to teachers whose curriculums may or may not be the actual curriculums that they would even prefer to teach as personal individuals. It's like, if I'm going to listen to a teacher, at least give me some soulful advice. At least give me a little bit of your life. At least give me a bit of your gift. What is the gift of the teacher in front of me? I don't want a curriculum. I want to hear the unmitigated human gifts of that person. I want to hear their stories. I want to hear their achievements. I don't want to hear some scripted thing that's been written by the government. If I'm going to have a teacher, I want the whole person. I don't want them to talk off of a script. And if you're gifted at math, then teach me your secrets. Don't teach me what's out of the textbook. And so I think maybe Noah, part of what you're feeling your wild nature. No, Noah knows math. Noah's great at math, You're not. Okay, fair.
You want the textbook.
Sure.
For
Yeah, you want the
Yeah,
textbook. Yeah.
I can do math, but like it never captured me the way that other things did. So
You're good at chemistry.
I like
Naturally. Naturally. Who the hell is naturally good
I
at
can
chemistry?
naturally do chemistry pretty well.
Mhm.
But I also I'm more in. I like to intuitively do chemistry. Like I can understand how to like measure stuff and stuff like that, but like molecular chemistry, I don't necessarily do the math on. I more just, in most of the chemical projects I've done, I more intuitively figure out how to do them and feel my way through chemical experiments, which isn't necessarily the safest, nor the way that I would recommend other people do it. Um, but that's the way that I kind of learned chemistry alongside learning chemistry through growing up in school, because I was always disappointed with what we were learning in school. I mean, from a young age, I was reading military field manuals on improvised explosives, and I was like, I don't want to learn about how cell function works or how atomic structure works because A, I've already studied how to do this, and B, I'd much rather be making explosives in my backyard. Um, and frankly, it wouldn't be safe to teach children how to make explosives in school en masse. Um, I don't necessarily think that we shouldn't teach children how to make explosives in school en masse because it might be valuable information. I think everybody should have a cursory understanding of how dangerous the world actually is. If you know what you're doing, you can go into most households in America, go under their kitchen sink, and make explosives out of it. That's just the strange reality of the world that we live in. You know, if you know what you're doing, you can pretty much improvise anything into a weapon. Brian, I'm sure you have some degree of understanding of that as a martial artist. But the world is inherently dangerous that we live in. And I think, at least in America, we seem to have this idea that we have this safety net as the medical system, which is not nearly as robust as we tend to seem to assume it is. I think that's kind of getting more and more realized in the last couple of years here, though. But for a lot of my lifetime, there seemed to be this American hubris to the way that we interacted with the world as a society. And there was just a immortality towards how we interacted with things. And I know I myself definitely did as well, at times to my own peril. Um,
I've seen
but
that exact same thing.
yeah, I mean, like you got to see that firsthand with me growing up. Like I basically thought I was indestructible, and then I'd go get broken, and then I'd heal from it really quickly, and then I would think I was indestructible, and then I'd go get broken, and then I'd heal from it really quickly.
Well,
And I think,
and American indestructibility is reflected in our armed forces. For instance, we go into these countries and we're like so tricked out with all the gear and we're flying planes over them, just destroying them with all of our technology. It's like we're using these godlike abilities on
it's like we shouldn't
people
be there.
on people who don't rival us at all in their
Yeah.
capabilities. And so I think that there is
It's like we shouldn't be there at all.
well, there is this American mentality that's like, we're invincible. We are just so powerful. And that as Americans, we just deserve everything. We just deserve everything.
yeah,
And
it's almost like what happens when you're secretly an empire with 678 military bases across 78 countries, and
Yeah.
like
All for
Yeah.
defensive reasons, of
Yeah.
all
course.
for national security
Yeah.
purposes, of course.
Yes.
Have you seen the one where it's like maps of military bases around Iran? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, all for our national defense, of course.
Yeah.
It's like, Jesus Christ. Of course they would feel threatened. We
Yeah.
completely encircle them. Same
Yeah.
thing with like
It's,
NATO bases in Russia. It's like, well, of course they feel fucking threatened. We've got missiles right on their fucking border.
I do wonder what would happen if we took a more Swiss approach and we're just like, y'all can do whatever
Oh
the
my
fuck
God,
y'all are
Israel
gonna
wouldn't
do.
exist anymore. So
Play war games anymore with you guys because we all know that we can just give you the fucking boot at any point if we wanted to. We don't need to be everywhere at once. I wish they would just recall all the
we
soldiers.
also don't even have to give all those countries money.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's almost like we could just.
It's like we could
America,
rebuild our entire fucking country if
like
we
we could
didn't
focus
give all
on
these
our
shitty
own
little countries money.
shattered country for a little while and help our own people instead of endlessly
Why do we
stretching
give any
ourselves
money to Europe? Why does any money go to Europe? Do you guys not understand that Europeans do not like us? They think less of us. And we fund their entire existence.
Most of the rest of the world thinks less of us.
And we protect them with.
And we should not pay. We should not pay for that. We should not pay for them to exist.
A lot of other countries,
they should pay for themselves.
Are living
like
happier than us. They're living longer than us. They don't get nearly as educated. Like people in say
where in Europe are you thinking
Costa Rica in Central America. Okay. They live so long. We protect them, and there are a lot of countries in the world which the shadow of our peace gives them paradise. Meanwhile, us American citizens, we're so overstimulated with all of these issues. And I think part of the reason why Vladimir Putin is going to war in Ukraine is because he hates the gay agenda. And he's like, oh, wait. So America has all these military bases everywhere, and their entire government is turning towards the gay agenda.
Solid casus belli.
What?
Like, I've got a friend who consistently calls this an illegal war, an illegal act of aggression from Russia against Ukraine. No, this is a perfectly legal war, and Russia has a completely legal and valid casus belli. Ukraine has always been part of Russia for a very long time. Ukraine's only been independent for 40 years, since the 80s. Another good reason, Another really good reason is the entire idea of Ukraine being independent was so that there would be a buffer between the East and the West. And now Ukraine, it had an election that was somewhat neutral, or maybe a little bit more pro-Russian, but still neutral. And the CIA staged a coup and overthrew a democratically elected government in Ukraine. There were elections held in the Russian-speaking regions of Ukraine that overwhelmingly wanted to be part of Russia. So, I really don't. This whole thing, it's not the U.S.'s business. What is this? We're funding a Holocaust against Christians is what's going on. There's Orthodox Christians on both sides just killing each other for no reason at all. You have Vladimir Zelensky persecuting Orthodox Christians for no reason at all. He's like, oh, well, these people, nobody liked them. They're with the Russian church. That the only thing that's like, yeah, church-wise, like, it's a universal, it's an Orthodox, they're Orthodox, bro. Of course, they're going to be.
This podcast has a very warm...
united with the Russian Orthodox Church, right?
Yeah, I hear you, Alex. I hear you. And on that subject, because what you're talking about is Zelensky going towards progressivism away from conservatism. And when you conserve your past. And that's conserving orthodoxy. So he's a fool not to want to conserve orthodoxy. Part of the reason why we're so godlike in America is because...
in an Orthodox country. I don't think it's progressive. I don't think it's progressive at all.
We're godlike in this country either.
And I wouldn't want to push what we do in this country on any other country in the world. What we do in this country is completely disgusting. Our entire idea of having an atheist state's disgusting. The idea that there's a separation of the church and state is disgusting. The idea that the state is allowed to push this homosexual agenda on, but you're not allowed to push Christianity is completely disgusting. I mean, the moral degradation of this country, the idea that there has to be a law now that says that there's only men and women is completely disgusting. What does that have to say for our society? Our society is complete moral degeneracy.
Well,
There's no other way to say it.
what we could call is a convention of states, and a convention of states could ratify the Constitution to re-implement no division between church and state. We could once again.
Well, they should be divided. They're different things.
Well, you just said they should.
Well, I think they should be like together. I think like the church should be the moral guiding line of the state. Yeah. Like I think the state should be adherently Christian, but I don't think the state should run the church.
I don't think the church should
Does
run
that
the
make
state.
sense?
That does make sense. But
Yeah.
you can practice Christianity and be a
Well,
congressman.
what do you
I was just
Yeah,
refuting
I
your
don't
point.
think
I was
like the
refuting your
state
point
should
because you
run.
said it's
Yeah, I'm
disgusting.
sorry. I didn't mean like that the state should run the church. You know, like I don't think that the state should be making bishops and stuff. I just think that the state should have the same religion as the culture that which it represents. You know, like if the people of the United States were majority Christian, then it should be a Christian state that reflects those things, right? Like the state obviously can't have a religion because it's not a human being, but I think that the religion of the state should be reflecting of the people that live in it. You know,
Well, that's the
and I
idea of
think that religion
representation.
should be
That's it.
Christianity.
That's
Yeah,
reflected
but we
in
don't have that.
that's reflected in the Federalist Papers. But how
Yeah.
that came to disappear, we would
But
have
that doesn't exist in this country anymore. There's like a
But why?
cult-like,
because
there's a cult-like devotion of a separation of the church and the state.
but the
That you can't talk
responsibility
about church
the
topics in
responsibility
government.
is on the individual to fight that cult. The responsibility is not the government's responsibility to fight that cult. Us as
Yeah, but
individuals.
couldn't it be your responsibility as a Christian to fight within that government?
True.
So it's like,
But
yeah,
you
it is
can't
your
do that. You can't do
responsibility as
that.
an individual, but that works at the, what do you mean?
You can do that. If you're a
when
Christian
you are a
congressman.
Christian and you are in Congress and you're not pushing a Christian agenda, whose agenda are you pushing? You know, like if you're a Christian and you're in Congress and you're not pushing and you're passing laws that are unchristian, you're not Christian. You're doing things that are unchristian.
Well, you'd have to get
You're
into the
engaging in sin, and you're actually using your position of power to enable other people to engage in sin. So I don't really think that. And what do you mean? Like, did I think? Because I don't think that the church should be making laws, but when the government, which does legislate morality, that's what governments do. Where's that morality coming from? I think that morality should come from the Christian church.
you
I
think the
think that the
government
state should have
legislates
a church
morality.
so much that the people have a church.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Doesn't
that
the government legislate morality?
I would agree with that. I think that the current
Like,
position,
where does it not? If you don't think
government-
that, if you don't think that's the case, Brian, like where do you think that the government does not legislate morality?
You'd have to define morality in accordance with an individual law. So then you take that law and you look at the law and you
Murder.
say, what parts of this law is or is
Murder.
not moral? Okay, murder. Murder is
Rape, incest.
Those are against the law. Those are against the law. So we've
yeah,
already
these are things that
so
are
we've-
against
we've
the law,
already-
and these are things that are immoral.
True.
And this is the government using the power of the government to legislate morality, because the government has that right. You know, if the government didn't say that you couldn't engage in incest, people would engage in incest. People still do engage in
But there's a
incest,
degree-
even though it's illegal.
But there's
you
a
know?
degree to which our morality is litigated in our households. So that's the purpose of a father.
Murder is illegal.
That's the purpose of a
still
father.
engage in murder.
It's not the government's job to take care of our every last moral dictate. That's the
No,
purpose of
and
a
I didn't
father.
say that.
You didn't.
And I didn't say that.
And so, sure, the government legislates morality, but the idea that that should be then reflected in an identification of church with state,
Yeah.
and that every law being not explicitly Christian, that
Well,
that
do you
doesn't
think that it's
mean
possible
well, if there's a
government
Christian
of the
author,
Christian people can pass laws that are non-Christian
well,
and still
Christian.
claim to be representative of the people that it represents, even if they're Christian and they have no say in the government? Like, do you think that that's possible? Do you think that it's possible that a government can legislate morality in an opposite direction of the people that it says to represent? Like,
In an
can't
opposite
that
direction.
happen? Yeah, so I think
That
that the
can happen.
government should be able to do it in the positive direction. Like, if a
But we
government,
can,
like,
but we can, and just because a law isn't explicitly decorated
yeah,
with Christian maxims doesn't mean that the spirit of that law is not Christian. It's the separation of church and state
well,
is it's a
yeah,
separation
actually, I could
of
do it
the
even if
of the explicit and
it,
the implicit.
I don't think that the law should say it's Christian, like, oh, because of Christianity, but I think, like, obviously the do not murder stuff that came from Christianity. You know, the pagans were okay with killing each other. You could kill each other in a court of law and stuff. So, um,
Well, the separation of church and state is
there's a lot of like morality that I think could be governed
it's
by the state.
true, true.
I don't see no reason.
It's
why it shouldn't.
it's an enlightenment value, and the founding fathers had the foresight to separate church and state on the basis of the idea that both
Yeah,
are
but they didn't.
both are separate
Yeah,
systems.
but the thing is they didn't do that. They didn't separate church and state.
Then what does it mean
It
that
does
we
not
have
say
a
that in the
separation of
Constitution.
where does it say
We
that?
don't have a separation of church and state. Where does it say that we have a separation of church and state?
I don't remember. Is it the Federalist Papers or is it the Constitution?
No.
Is it
doesn't
is it
say
ratified?
It was the Ku Klux Klan. No, it was the
no,
Ku Klux
no,
Klan.
it wasn't the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, actually it was. Yeah,
No.
actually it was.
The
And it's no
Federalist Papers.
paper,
The
and
Federalist. No.
It's not a Federalist paper. No, it doesn't say it in the Federalist
Federalist
Papers.
Papers aren't binding.
I know they're not
the
binding.
Federalist
I'm
Papers.
saying the authors of the
It doesn't say it in
Constitution
the Federalist
and the
Papers, though. It doesn't say
Declaration.
it in the Federalist Paper. It doesn't say it in the Constitution.
We're
It doesn't
arguing
say it
over
in
facts.
the Declaration of Independence.
We have to look this up.
Huh?
We have to look this up.
Okay.
Who originated the separation of church and state?
Well, a lot of people
Was it-
say it's from the First Amendment of the Constitution. As a matter of fact, the First Amendment of the Constitution does not make a separation of church and state. What it does do is it doesn't allow the federal government to create a state religion. And the purpose of that, I had already said earlier, was because states had already had their own religions at a state level. So the federal government didn't see a reason to impose a federal state religion.
Who
Because
was the
states had already chose them. Some of them had chosen Roman Catholicism, others had chosen the Episcopal Church.
who was the originator of the idea of the separation of church and state in the United
The
States?
Ku Klux Klan.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
What year?
I don't know, probably sometime immediately after the Civil War.
But I thought the separation of church and state began earlier
Yeah,
than
it
that.
began around this. Well, I mean, if you think the separation of the church and state is that, but it's not in the First Amendment. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say separation.
Okay, it's not
of
in the
church and state. It just
First
says that.
Amendment.
Just says that the.
But
it
when
says
was
that
that?
the First Amendment says that the federal government won't make any hindrance in you exercising any religion, and it won't create its own federal religion.
Okay, that's what the First Amendment says.
So you can
When we
practice your
say-
own religion, and I think and just because a state has a religion, I don't think that means it's imposing its religion on the populace.
But when we talk about the separation of church and state, we're referring to a kind of value and a
Yeah,
maxim.
what kind of value?
And a maxim, and that's actually it's in the doctrine of our Constitution. It's located in the First Amendment.
It's not.
But when I say the separation of church and state, just because there's no
what is that?
line
Well, can
in
you
the
tell
Bill
me
of
what you mean
Rights
by that?
or the Constitution or
Well,
any
the Bill of Rights
or
says
any
the first
federal
10 amendments of the Constitution.
legislation, just because there's not a law that says the church and the state must be separated, doesn't mean that idea is not enshrined in the First Amendment. So when we
Okay,
refer
well,
to the separation of
Why
church
would
and
you
state,
think that?
we're
Why do you think
because
that?
other countries are not that way, and prior to the Enlightenment, they weren't that way. Other
What do
places
you
aren't
mean?
like us. Other places don't have the First Amendment. They don't
Okay.
have the freedom of speech. They don't have the freedom
But
to gather.
Where
So
are you getting? Okay,
so you are
now you're
allowed to
talking
be
about freedom of
Islamic.
speech. Let's
You are
talk
allowed
about,
to be. go
yeah.
ahead.
But that
You are
doesn't
allowed to
mean
be
separation
Islamic in
of
our
church
country,
state.
and we can't kick
What's
down
that
your
have to do with
door
separation of church and state?
because we can't kick down your door if you want to worship Muhammad. We can't.
Okay, well, they weren't kicking down people's doors in England, even though they've got the state religion of the church in England.
There was lots of religious
Okay.
persecution in Europe
Okay.
prior to the Enlightenment. There was tons of religious people came to America because
Like
of religious Like France.
Britons
Like
were
France.
inciting rebellion in England.
In France, they were killing each other over Protestantism versus. Go ahead.
Yeah, Huguenots were engaging in terrorism against the Catholics, of course.
Yes.
France is not a place that we should recognize, that we should look up to. But I don't understand what that has to do with the church and separation of church and state. Like you're talking about,
Because our Enlightenment values are
that's
inherited
not
from European precedents, which we saw as inferior.
okay.
So we decided to enshrine something superior when we indoctrinated the First Amendment into our Constitution.
It doesn't say that in the Constitution.
That doesn't
and
matter.
If they meant something,
That doesn't
why
matter.
didn't they say it? Okay,
That
well,
doesn't
why would
matter.
you think that a majority Christian people would say something like that? Like, where are you getting this from if they've never alluded to it? If they haven't alluded to it in any of their writings, why do you think this way?
Do you think I made up the separation of church and state? You're saying the
I
Ku
don't
Klux
think that you
Klan
made
did?
it up, but I don't. Well, they didn't make it up; they were repeating it. But it is widely believed then, and people like when people say separation of church and state, they're talking about this fictitious thing that wasn't happening. Of course, like nobody, just because a state has a religion doesn't mean it's imposing its religion on its people. Just because the Church of England exists doesn't mean that there's not Muslims in England. England's now pretty much a majority Muslim country, and just because a state has a religion, it does not preclude the ability of other religions to exist in that state. I don't understand where that's coming from with an idea of separation of church and state. Even in states that were explicitly Christian, they had Jewish and Muslim populations in them. They had pagan populations in them. So the idea that like, oh, well, that exists only in the United States and that there wasn't religious persecution in this country. Of course, there was religious persecution in this country. There was.
There was.
And there should be.
But it was.
There was,
But it
and there
wasn't.
still should
But it
be.
wasn't. But was it litigated?
It wasn't.
So
It was to the
here's
same
thing.
extent. Joseph Smith was killed in this country because of religious persecution.
But that was religious
It
persecution
exists to the same extent.
of individuals who were not. Well, they may or may not have held government positions. What's important is to understand the very broad picture, which is that in Europe, there was a greater identification of the church with the state, and that was seen during times where the Pope would be fighting with kings. So
If
at
you
that
think
time,
that
at
the
that
founding
time,
fathers
the king
were fighting
would bow
against
to
that,
the Pope.
Why at that
The king
time,
would bow to the Pope. What we
As he
wanted
should.
after what we
everyone
wanted,
should bow to their bishop?
that's a different claim. What we wanted during the course of the Enlightenment was the idea that let's try something different. So you can. So I sustain.
I don't.
I
thi-
sustain.
Okay, look, I don't
well, I'm
think
just
they
trying
say
to.
that because they've never said it.
Well, I just want to
George
sustain
Washington
your
never
claim.
said it.
You
Thomas
said
Jefferson never said it.
you said the separation of church and state is disgusting, but the Enlightenment, what the Enlightenment did is it said, okay, but
Okay,
all
well,
of
what was
that.
good about the Enlightenment?
But that's a different conversation. I'm glad to have it.
Well, you're the one using the Enlightenment as an argument. Like you're using it as your framework right now. You're saying because of the Enlightenment era did this. I don't think the Enlightenment era was good.
Alex,
I don't think
you said the
Enlightenment was good.
separation of church and
A lot
state
of
is
the liberal
disgusting.
enlightenments.
So,
It is, yeah.
so many of
Yeah, I
our
think it's
values are
disgusting.
predicated
And
on
I
the
don't think it's
separation
done
of church and
anything
state.
good on that. Like what? Like what?
What do you mean?
You said so many of our values are predicated on the separation of church and state. Like what?
Like the
I
idea that you
think of
can't
the single
persecute.
value that I have that is predicated on the separation of church and state.
Well, you can't legally crucify me. That's cruel and
Okay,
unusual
well, what's
punishment.
that have to do with the separation? Yeah, what's that have to do with the
Because
separation of
it's
church and
the
state?
spirit of the Enlightenment. The spirit of the Enlightenment informed our laws.
That doesn't
So there's
make any
all sorts
sense.
of religious things that you
That doesn't
can't
make
do.
zero sense.
That makes perfect sense.
Why are you consulting spirits that aren't with the Holy Spirit?
What are you
Why are you
talking about?
consulting spirits that aren't the Holy Spirit?
I never did that. I never did that.
You
I never
brought
did
it
that.
up.
No, I
You
didn't.
just said that we
Rome
use the
crucified
spirit
Christ.
of the Enlightenment.
Rome
You
crucified
said that
Christ.
we use the spirit of the Enlightenment to guide our laws today.
What is a spirit?
A spirit is
Who says the Enlightenment isn't
anything.
informed
It's a
by the
medical-
Holy Spirit?
You said that.
Who said the Enlightenment isn't informed
I
by the
didn't
Holy
say
Spirit?
that. It's your.
Why don't I
Okay,
say
well,
that?
It's not.
It
Why
is.
would
It is. It is. Because it made things better.
Like what? Okay, first off,
The Enlightenment grants us a
let's
lot of good
backtrack.
things.
Let's backtrack a little bit.
You said the separation of church and state is good because I can't crucify you. That doesn't have anything to do with the separation of church and state.
That was just a single example.
Separation of church and state. And then you were talking right now about, well, let's talk about the example that just happened, because this is what just played out.
Go ahead.
And then you want to talk about how that's because the spirit of the Enlightenment is guiding the law to do that. No,
that's obviously what's happening.
Punishment, because it was cruel and unusual punishment. The spirit of the Enlightenment, whether we talk about the Enlightenment Revolution or not, is immaterial. You brought it up. It's not material to the argument. We're talking about the separation of church and state.
Well, you said it's disgusting.
Why it should exist. I think it is disgusting. I think it's disgusting. Yeah.
So much of our okay. So you want to leave the country? You want to leave the country? You live in America, Alex.
Yeah, and I think
you were born here.
I think that we could. Yeah, I was born here. What about it? It's a geographical location. Look, I'm gonna try really hard to fight for this country, but if it doesn't work, I'm leaving. Okay. But it's
well,
not
you're gonna have to fight a bunch of Protestants who believe in this stuff. Yeah, they believe in this stuff. Who? You and what army? You and what army? You and what army?
Me and what
You've
army?
got to
the
go.
Trad Cats, the Ortho Bros, and we're not even talking about the ability. I'm not talking about religious persecution here.
Do you have a voter constituency? Do you have a voter constituency? Because if I talk to anybody else, they're going to say the Enlightenment was good. Well, first off, they're going to say Benjamin Franklin was a genius. They're going to say Thomas Jefferson was a genius. Do you think those guys?
They weren't.
Do you think those guys are disgusting? They thought the separation of church was okay, and you said the separation of church and state was disgusting.
I did say that, and they didn't argue for it. What I did say is that they didn't argue for a separation of church and state. If they did argue for it, why didn't they enforce it? Why didn't they make an amendment saying that there was a separation of church and state? Why didn't they put it down at a state level? Why is it that they allowed state governments to have their own state religions that they recognized at the time of the founding of the Constitution? Why is that? And that's because they weren't arguing what you're saying. They didn't believe in what you're saying. They didn't believe that a country shouldn't be guided by Christian morals. The entire founding documents of this country is that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You can't have these rights without having a creator. It's an inherently Christian document. You have the rights that are enshrined in the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. These come from an inherently Christian understanding of what your rights are as a human being. To say that the founding fathers didn't believe that they believed in a separation of church and state and that they were fighting for that is a completely gross mischaracterization of the facts. It's not true. They didn't write it. They didn't allude to it. You're thinking that you know better than what they wrote.
No. You're putting words in my mouth, Alex. You're putting words in my mouth, Alex. Listen to me. Listen to me. Listen to me. Listen to me. You need to listen to me. You need to listen to me. You need to listen to me. When you say the separation of church and state is disgusting, that's a big claim.
What am I saying?
That's exactly what we need to discuss.
Why is it a big claim?
It's a big claim because what does that mean? So if I just let you say that, then maybe that means that you can just kill a Muslim by shooting him in the back of the head.
I think the state divorcing itself from the church was disgusting. I think that's disgusting. I think the state should be subservient to the church. I think the state should get its truth from the church. I don't think that
that's a completely different governmental system than the one we have. And our government works. Our Constitution is the oldest one in the world. Why is our Constitution so old, Alex? Why is our Constitution the oldest?
Our Constitution's not so old.
Yes, it is. It's the oldest extant Constitution in the world. It's the oldest constitutional document in the world. Every other nation on Earth.
That doesn't make it old.
No, it's the longest living. It's the longest living nation building document in the world.
It's not old, dude.
A lot of the Enlightenment, a lot of these guys,
150 old.
They were really smart. These guys were really smart.
I know,
and they were very well educated in history. And if
Yeah,
we
they
have the
were. They were
church,
a lot more
if
educated than me and a lot smarter than I am. Yeah,
if we have the Pope,
but they didn't believe in a separation of church and state.
if we have the Pope adjudicating things like crimes,
When did I? I'd never said I don't
it's
want the
better
Pope
that we have a
adjudicating
three
things.
government.
I
It's better
don't
that we
think
have
I
a
don't
three
want the
branch
Pope
system.
adjudicating things. I don't want the Pope adjudicating things,
Okay, okay.
and I don't want the church making laws.
Yeah.
I never said that.
But you said the
I
state
said I
should be
want
under the
church.
church.
Yeah, this.
But what if the church
should
encroaches on the state? The church is encroached on the
Why
state
would
all the
the
time.
state be in? Why? Okay, well they're not really allowed to because they don't have an army. They
Oh,
can't.
well, the
They
church
don't
has
have an
encroached
army.
on the state in Europe, and the founding fathers knew that
Okay,
that
well
happened.
at that time, the church had an army, and that doesn't exist anymore. We're talking about right now,
Why did
and
the
the
church
Pope
have
isn't
an
the head
army?
of the Christian church, and okay,
The church had an army because the
the
church
church had the
was
army because they're okay.
leveraging.
Stop. Can you asked me a question. You're
Please.
asking me why did the church have an army, and I'm going to tell you why the church had an army.
Go ahead.
Because at that time there was a country called the Papal States, and the king of the Papal States was the Pope.
Uh-huh.
The Pope
Right.
was actually recognized as the governmental leader of this area by the Roman Emperor. States have armies. That's why and many times the Papal State had been invaded by various Italian states, by France, by Spain, many times. So yeah, the church needed an army to protect the cardinals, the bishops, the people of Rome, people who were being murdered and massacred whenever the French, whenever the Sicilians, whenever the Genovese, whenever whoever it happened to be wanted to pass by and sack Rome, wanted to do it. The Pope needed an army to do that. But that's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm advocating for. What I am advocating for is a return of Christian ethics. I think that having lawmakers be in subservience and do homage to God before they do things I don't think that's wrong. I don't think that that's against what the founding fathers thought. I don't think that the founding fathers were against the establishment of state religions because they would have said something about it because they existed at the time of the founding fathers. You can look that up. Like I could look it up right now and I can find a list of the states that had it. It existed. And there's really, I don't understand where this idea that, oh, because these exaggerations happened, that's what I'm advocating for. I'm not advocating for that. I haven't said it because I think that the state is subservieting itself to the guiding light of the church. Doesn't mean that I think that bishops should be in charge over the state. Doesn't mean that I think that, I mean, if the bishops did have government power, I would see no reason with them exercising government power, but they don't. That's not the society that we live in. I don't see any reason to change the system of law that we have into what I would have if I was in charge. Like what I would have is different than what we have, but that's not what I'm talking about. It's not what I'm advocating for. I'm just saying that I don't think that the church I think that the separation of the church and state is completely disgusting and morally detestable.
Okay, and I'm beginning to
understand.
I'm beginning to understand
it.
I'm beginning to understand your meaning.
Because
well, let me respond. You've just laid out something really elaborate, and I want to respond because what you just laid out is actually feasible.
Before you respond, can I ask one thing?
Yeah.
Can I just ask you one question?
Can
I? Where did you get the idea that the founding fathers are against, that they're against what I was saying, or where do you get the idea of that they're against that they're against a separation of church and state, or they're for that they're for a separation of church and state?
Do you want me to cite a passage of a book?
No.
Do you want me to quote someone?
Well, you don't have to cite a passage of a book or anything. I haven't cited the passages of any books, but I could find the sources of what I said. it
Well, that's a
can
waste of
cook
time.
this.
Don't ask me
Just
where
look
I
it up.
got an
But
idea,
I
because
no
we're
no
both
I'm not.
educated.
I'm just trying to
What we
figure
want
out
to
like
do is we want to
I'm just
negotiate.
trying to figure out like how you came. Yeah, how did you come to the idea? Like
That's my
what?
understanding of history,
Yeah,
which is a
I
collection.
where did you learn that?
I
Like,
distinctly
because
remember being taught that in class with Brian
yeah, that's not
in the
true
same
though.
room.
Well, what you're
I meant that,
advocating.
like, I could tie this back into what we
Because
were talking
it's
about
not in the
earlier with
First
our education
Amendment.
system. This is something that I remember being taught in school, was that there was a foundational separation of church and state instilled in the foundation of our country. That is something I was taught in public education school.
Yeah, it's not true though.
That's where that idea probably spawns from.
Really? Yeah, that's
I would
See,
imagine
that
so. If
goes
you
into
learn
what I'm
something
saying.
that
It's
is
morally
coerced
detestable, and
through
they're trying to. I didn't
nothing,
know it went back as far back to what infect us. Yeah, that's not a true thing. I mean, you should go back and you should read the First Amendment of the Constitution, where apparently it says that there's a separation of the church and state. It does say that the federal government will not make a religion, but there was a reason for that, and that's because states already had their own religions.
you also have to factor in, Alex, that you're particularly well versed in history and in like the passage of documentation cycles throughout history and how government structures get set up. Not everybody has studied it quite to the same depth that you have. And the way that it
I'm
is
sorry.
taught,
I was surprised by the idea. I don't want to be. I hope you don't think I'm being mean or picking on you, Brian. I'm
No,
not trying to be mean.
I'm
I've
incredibly.
I've
I'm
quite
just trying to
enjoyed,
defend what I said.
No,
I've
that's
quite
all right.
enjoyed listening to this.
And I'm also I'm really curious on what you think is wrong with what I think.
Oh, well,
I'm
that's
sorry
well. This is
for
the beauty.
filibustering you right now, please.
No worries. This is the beauty of a podcast, because so much of what you said is feasible. The beauty of an individual is that individuals are capable of doing things that other people cannot by way of our skills. So what you've done, I believe, is you've taken the skills of a very strong mind, particularly a mind, that being your own mind, for the sake of working with facts. How my mind works is I take large generalizations that a lot of other people believe, and I manipulate them in accordance with what will work best for large amounts of people. So the problem, Alex, is that I can't see your constituency. So to me, you sound like somebody who's completely out in the woods. And I'm like, whoa, wait. What about all these thousands of people over here who don't believe that? And I'm just trying to adapt what you're saying.
Okay.
So the idea that this is coming from me.
When you hear that I don't believe in separation of church, like, what does that, because when you were talking about things that like,
I thought you meant something else.
Like, I thought a lot of those things are morally detestable too, so I just want to see like where that comes from, is the separation of church and state, like, because I think that that's morally detestable too. I don't think that the state should come in and force you to have a certain religion.
Well, I think when you say separation, you're talking about a boundary, and a boundary, boundaries are permeable, just like a fence with a gate. Boundaries are permeable, just like a fence with a gate. So when we say separation of church and state, that's a sentence, and that sentence has a meaning, and then the meaning is interpretive. So you can interpret the meaning in many different ways. So when I heard your meaning, I interpreted it as something else. But now that I've heard more of what you have to say, I understand your interpretation better, and I see it more reasonably. And that's the beauty of a podcast. If you had never told me that, I would have never understood the discrepancy between interpretations. Now that I know what you think, I know what you think. And I respect the nuances of what you just said and the feasibility of what you just said, insofar as, yes, what if we had a little bit more acknowledgement of the inherently Christian nature of all of our state values enshrined in our laws? If that was given more respect, maybe we wouldn't have so much spiritual fraying in our damn government.
It needs to
so I hear what you're saying.
They're Christian laws.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah. I'm not explicitly Christian. I hear what you're saying.
I don't think like
we have to adjudicate these boundaries.
That, like the Christian morals.
Yeah.
That we have, like you don't really have to say that they're Christian in order to think that they're right or wrong. These just happen to be the morals, like,
don't lie, cheat, and steal.
Very true.
These are those are from Christian ethics.
Yeah.
But
But when we say the word Christian, we're referring to a set of values and practices within a certain scope. And when I say Buddhist or Islam, I'm referring to something I'm referencing.
Yeah, I would be against a state religion if it was Buddhist or Islam.
Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, I have to think about this. I haven't thought about this, but I'm glad that we discussed this, Alex. Very interesting topic. Very interesting. Okay. And a lot of your thoughts are very pertinent and timely, especially given the progressive degeneration of our state on the basis of losing sight of our Christian values. I completely see where you're coming from. I just want to make sure that we're not just throwing out the whole thing, the whole goddamn thing.
I don't want to be like, I don't want to make sure that we're arguing against two different things, like that you think that, like, I don't want you to be arguing against stuff that I didn't say, and I don't want to be arguing against stuff that you don't say. Perfect. Right?
That's fair.
It was definitely very entertaining for me to watch Brian.
I thought it was really fun.
Interpret something different than what Alex was saying.
Yeah, that was fun, actually.
It was also very good to see you guys reconcile.
That was like a good tennis match. That was like a good tennis match, Alex. That was like a good tennis match.
I thought it was really fun.
And I don't know who won either. I don't know who won, because you might be right. But I'm excited to discuss that further.
Wait, but what do you mean, though? Like, what do you think an alternative is if there's no, like, if the state isn't governed by Christianity, by Christian morals?
Well, it has to do with
the alternative is
who is the person and what is the law that mandates that, and in what form. So, do I dress up with a big bishop hat?
System that we have
does
now.
The person? Does
no.
the person? Does
no,
the?
Because they're not a bishop.
Does the person in the legislative chair wear a big bishop hat? No.
No, because they're not part of the church.
In Europe, so as we dress differently, without robes, we're going towards some kind of secular Protestant Enlightenment thing that's different from Europe. In America, we've got something a little different, and it looks different, and that's instantiated in the way we dress when we are in Congress. So the idea that we might, say, incorporate some more inherently Christian historical values, what would be interesting to me is to think, how is that going to change how people dress? Well, that's perfectly feasible that we might start to dress differently.
That was different, though.
You don't think so? So okay.
No. Well, there were other republics at that time.
Yeah.
There was the Dutch Republic, there was Venice, there was Genoa. There were other republics at this time, but I don't really understand, like, I'm sorry, I didn't really I didn't get the Europe comparison to it. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, yeah. I was speaking in such a large generalization. I was speaking in such general terms, Alex. When we speak in general terms, it's hard to. I'm sorry,
I didn't understand. I couldn't understand what you were saying.
That's okay. I tend to speak very generally. I tend to speak very.
Can I try to steel man it?
Go ahead.
I just want to, just for clarification, I'm really trying to just. Okay, so
we're at the 2-hour mark. I just want to say we're at the 2-hour mark, but go ahead.
Okay, I mean,
oh man, it's getting good.
I'm sorry. So when do you think I'm talking about, or when the alternative to do you think that a separation of church and state just means that the state is not governed by the church? Or do you think
I thought that you might have meant that. I thought that you might have meant that.
Okay. Or do you think that when, because you're talking what would the legislature wear, the bishop's hat or whatever, but he's not, he's not a bishop. There's certain things that make a bishop, and that's actually specifically laid out in Acts, right? So
this is such an important discussion.
This is incredibly important. That
I don't think that the state, you don't think that the state should like govern religion, right? Like it shouldn't say that this is Christian morality because we say so. You're saying that's wrong, right?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Okay,
So
but what if
wait,
like
wait,
what they're
wait. So
saying?
just for me to clarify real quick. So you're saying that it's
Well, just forget
um,
what if it's not Christian morality is what I'm saying. Like just because I don't think that the state should have the authority to dictate what is and what is not Christian morality. I don't trust the state with that sort of government, like with that sort of power.
This Oh, okay. The state shouldn't have the
Uh,
power to dictate what is and is not Christian morality. One
Yeah,
problem
I
that we're
think that it should just follow Christian morality.
well
I
here
think the state should be influenced by Christian morals and ethics because, and just this is my opinion, my study of religion that I've done so far, that the teachings of Christ impose the greatest net benefit to the people under an administration following such a gentle moral structure, that being guided by that allows for laws that reflect and enforce a society of gentleness towards each other without it being a aggressively competitive race for resources like we currently have. And I would say that the majority of our societal level problems are because infused in our state mandated education is a secular materialism that lacks fundamental components of creation that are important to address. I do not recall our public schools adequately addressing the spiritual nature of reality in any way. I remember them talking about several different religions at various times, but never actually delving into the very real part of yourself, which is the soul. And not that I think it's the state's responsibility to necessarily do that, but if you are providing education for everybody and mandating it, then it should be comprehensive education. And if you are not at least providing some degree of education about spiritual matters, then you're going to be inadequately preparing people for interaction with the world. And so when the state lacks a guiding moral framework,
ethos.
it, yeah, it subjects itself to a level of decay that we now see reflected around us, in which things that are atrocious are being passed as legal and even encouraged as something that should not only be included and accepted but celebrated within society. Um,
On the grounds of a
and
secular materialist sort of separation of church and state. Something like that.
yeah, I mean, so I will provide a brief comparison real quick. So, um, you guys brought up some stuff about trans people earlier, and um, it's a nuanced one. On one hand, there are legitimate cases of gender dysmorphia in which that might be a legitimate treatment for that particular condition. However, that particular condition is exceedingly rare, and
Yeah, but
even
it's
then,
never called for to like to transform someone into like to they're not prescribing top surgeries and stuff for that.
No, no. Uh,
There might be other
to
treatments, you know.
there have been policies at play in which it is all right for minors to make life-altering medical decisions about their bodies without parental consent or input. And there seems to be a agenda push towards an embrace of this particular thing, especially in the last decade or so. While also very much not looking at some very unfortunate statistics that coexist within that of high levels of suicide, high levels of regret for making that decision after doing it. It ultimately not being the thing that they thought it would be. In many cases, not necessarily in all cases, but in many cases, it seems to be something that people do not find the fulfillment of that they went out looking for it. And I think to have a legal system in which you are allowing children to make that decision while also influencing their mandated education towards an ideological swing where that is not only allowable but acceptable and to some extent encouraged for the sake of overcompensating for the mistakes of history and finding yourself on the horseshoe from being on the wrong side of history all the way over back to being on the wrong side of history once again. And I think that it does not benefit us as a society to allow our legal and societal zeitgeist level of instruction be influenced by something that is amoral inherently. And I think that this is
Amen.
something that we need. Oh, thanks. I think that's something that we need to remedy. And I think that ultimately starts with education. I think the top priority that we should be doing overall is educational reform in this country. Because, frankly, Americans are stupid. There's a lot of stupid Americans out there, and it sucks to say it, but there's a lot of stupid Americans out there who will believe fucking anything.
Yep.
And that is not good.
I think you're right. It's not good. And part of what we are as men is we are adjudicators. Men actually are the law. At a very sociological and anthropological level, men are the hands of the law.
Yeah.
Masculinity,
for that,
in a sense, masculinity. Before there were laws, there was anger. Before there were laws, there was anger. So a lot of what we are doing here and the project of our lives as men is to adjudicate right and wrong so that we can enjoy our women and our children and our families in a safe society, and that we can be happy and safe because we know what is going on, because we used our words to and our reason to remember what is better and what is worse in accordance with history and the fruits of different places and different peoples. Namely, we draw from the Jews, the Greeks, the Romans. We draw from
What do we draw from the Jews?
our British heritage. We draw
British heritage from the Jews.
We draw no. So Alex,
What do we draw from
Alex,
the Jews?
You didn't interrupt Noah. So Alex,
All right. I'm sorry. I was just asking a question.
Sure. So, but we get our values from many different people, and the reason why secular materialism is competing for our sanity against Christianity is because in Europe and in ancient Greece, a great deal of hyper rationalism rose up, which was almost too rational. It became paradoxical. It started to degenerate into something that was not only unreasonable but demonic.
I mean, rationalism in and of itself is utterly illogical. Like to think that the
That's
universe
anything
is
but rational.
in a way that is not only perfectly designed for us to understand, but also that we're the only things in existence that can actually truly understand it. That is not only, that's pure hubris. It's completely illogical to make a claim like that. Plus, there are plenty, everywhere you look, there are plenty of things that are beyond the limits of logic and reason. And there is mystery that exists intentionally. It is a feature, not a bug. There are things that are meant to be mysterious. It's
Yeah.
part of the
Yeah. Well,
experience.
no man can understand God either, you know.
Yeah,
That's
exactly. I mean, like,
understandable. If you
that's
could
part of what
understand him,
that,
he wouldn't be God.
yeah, that's part of what that poem that I opened us up with was about. Of, there is a
Dude, if that went over my head, man. That was too smart for me.
oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
the whole thing's a palindrome. You can read it forwards and backwards.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was just saying, like in our legal system, sorry, no, I don't mean to interrupt.
No worries.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so like, I look around at the society, especially in America, and I see there on both sides of the political spectrum, there is this sharp sense of moral decay, and it is difficult to fight moral decay without moral structure. And if you are implementing a worldview onto your population, they are going to some extent or another, embrace that worldview writ large. And the ideological fabric of the United States for the last while has been driven more by the pursuit of profit and power than it has than the pursuit of peace and liberty and justice and truth. And so long as that continues, it will be a fight for all people to be free. And you see this reflected in every other country, including our own. We just, in this country, seem to have this delusion that we are a beacon of freedom and of some ability to just do whatever we want. And really, it seems more like the societal structure is you are free to do your best to get as comfortable as you can before you die. And I mean, I don't know. I look around, I don't see a lot of freedom. I don't see a lot of choices that I am free to make of my own volition. I see a lot of options that I have to pick from. But I don't see a lot of Americans who are free to genuinely pursue that which they feel inclined to be on this earth for. I know most people that I've talked to, they have something in them that they have an itch that they've always wanted to scratch, but never felt they've had the opportunity.
What if I told you that the idea of freedom that the founding fathers were talking about wasn't some libertine idea, the sense of word freedom, that you could do whatever you wanted, but the idea that you should be free to do the things you want to be, that you want to do?
Yeah.
The founding fathers didn't believe that they were free to do the things that they ought to do, so they rebelled.
Well, and there's
You know,
there's
there are
freedom
certain duties
within.
that they believed they had to themselves, to their countrymen, and to their God that weren't being met under the tyranny of King George III, even though that they, may have made up that tyranny.
Yeah, and I at one point in my life signed up to defend American freedom, and I've thought about what that means since I did that, and it's changed since I was 18, and um, there's this idea in Christianity that through Christ brings freedom, and then not too long after that, you see Paul sitting in chains. And
Well, it brings true freedom. Christ brings true
yeah,
freedom.
it brings this
It might
ability to
not
have
bring
true
temporal
freedom.
freedom, but that's a different thing.
Yeah, but I think if we want to have this true freedom, then we need to have a government that reflects what true freedom is in its guiding ethics and morals. And true freedom is not slavery to hedonistic desire. That
Yeah,
is not true
I
freedom.
agree
That
to
is
that.
slavery to hedonistic desire. And if you are in a society that constantly promotes
Hedonistic desire.
not only hedonistic desire, but just primal baseline impulse at a level that is
Yeah.
difficult to quantify. I mean, fuck,
It
dude,
would be almost
everything
as if
is,
that society were from the devil himself.
yeah, it's almost like everywhere you look on almost all advertising, there's some kind of sexual component to it. On everything, everywhere you look, all the time. Doesn't matter what it is. Sex sells. It's like the number one rule of marketing. And, frankly, um, the statistics on the percentage of Americans that watch pornography is not
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. No.
And it's something that
Yeah. Well, a lot of people think it's protected under the First Amendment, freedom
I
of speech.
I disagree. I mean, I was
I mean,
probably,
there's argument that it doesn't. So,
yeah, I was probably 8. Yeah, I was 8 when I found porn on the internet for the first time.
wow,
That
that's
is
that's
an
pretty young.
atrociously young age to discover something like that. I didn't necessarily want to. I was naive enough to think that I might have wanted that at the time, but retrospectively, like I would burn all of that out of my memory and never have done it in the first place if I could have. And the I don't think people are considering the post-secondary effects of what watching pornography at the level that we do in this country does, especially since it seems like the trends in pornography just get more and more taboo and perverse and violent.
Well, that's what they say.
Yeah, I mean that's I don't know. I don't partake. So, um, but I mean I did for a long time, and there definitely seemed to be a progression of intensity over the years that I watched it that seems like society has met at an almost subliminal level of violence and aggression and tension and almost isolation. There's um, like a soullessness to this country that
Yes.
uh,
That
uh,
that correlated with the rise of porn. I agree.
yeah, and
Yeah,
I
yeah. Well,
think
it really shouldn't be. It shouldn't be legal.
yeah, I
Bottom
agree. I
line,
mean, it
it's
heavily
not. It's
promotes
not. Doesn't.
promotes
You know.
human trafficking. It promotes child sex trafficking. Like
I mean,
It
yeah,
destroys people's lives.
in its
hundreds of
worst
thousands of
possible
people
cases,
kidnapped
it
every year.
does. But I
Like,
mean, it's it's the same thing as prostitution. It's not. It's yeah. I mean, the fucking heinous of the crimes are the most heinous and the extreme examples.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, it's also just. I mean, yeah, it's just it just shouldn't be allowed.
Fucked up shit that exists. Like, take the most fucked up shit that you can think of, and there's worse than that exists. And I remember in high school, I was like, not even out of attraction to it, just almost out of addiction and almost out of like morbid curiosity of like, how fucking deep does this fucking pit go? And guess what? The pit just goes deeper. It just gets worse.
So, okay, I've got a question. Do you think that it's more likely that we'll be able to make bestiality illegal in all 50 states or porn illegal in all 50 states? Like, which one do you think is more likely to happen first? Make bestiality illegal across all 50 states. Like, no place in the union can have bestiality, or pornography will be illegal. Which one do you think will be first? And in case you were wondering, yes, you can fuck animals in parts of this country, or you can have a friend hold on to a horse while the horse fucks you. That's legal in certain states in this country.
Why are you asking?
No, just wondering, like, which one do you think will be illegal first? If either of the two would ever be made illegal in this country.
To be honest, I would hope that pornography would get outlawed before bestiality, because less people are willing to participate in bestiality than people currently participate in pornography. It is a much narrower minority of people who are fucking animals than it is.
Yeah, but which one do you think would get passed first?
At face value, I feel like logically it would make sense to eliminate the fucking of animals.
Yeah,
legally.
Yeah. I think that would be the easiest one to rally behind too.
However, I think that we are not far off from a case being made that pornography is one of the most destructive substances on the planet and should be immediately outlawed, because it is absolutely
too many men, myself included, have all fallen victim to the depravities of pornography.
Yeah, like, I'm not gonna sit here and say I'm a saint who's never watched it. I have watched all kinds of fucked up shit. I am not proud of it.
I haven't watched anything fucked up, but I've watched people get fucked.
Yeah. I've watched all kinds of stuff that I'm not proud of, just out of morbid curiosity.
Okay, that's not true. I've watched some fucked up shit. I watched 2 Girls, 1 Cup. I watched One Guy, One Jar. I watched One Guy, One.
Okay.
That wasn't like.
It's getting late. It's getting late, you guys. It's getting late.
Wait.
It's getting late.
Which one do you think will be outlawed first?
I think that
if either one would be.
If either one would be outlawed first in all 50 states, I'd say that bestiality would be outlawed first, because so many people are going to fight in favor of pornography.
What if I told you there was an election recently, like within the last 20 years, in one of the 50 states where they voted to keep bestiality?
Then that might change my answer. But I'm gonna.
That happened in Oregon. Actually.
I'm gonna stay with
that
bestiality.
Happened in the state of Oregon. In the state of Oregon, you and a friend can like, you can have your friend hold your horse on a lead while he fucks you. That's legal in Oregon, and they voted on that.
Well, I think I'm about ready to go to bed, you guys, and it's been good. And I think that's good for a wrap up. This has been reasonably unreasonable.
Reasonably unreasonable.
This is a good.
It's been pretty unreasonable today.
It's a good name, yeah.
That was a good episode.
That was a great episode. That was a slam dunk. Way to go, guys. All right.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts, gentlemen?
I'm good.
I think we covered a great breadth today, and I love breadth. Depth is great, but breadth is just as valuable, because
we gotta have more arguments. I think
we gotta have arguments and adjudications, and
we gotta get better at arguing.
We gotta get better at arguing. Yeah,
neither of us will be able to argue our points to anyone.
Exactly. And so I think that everything we covered was relevant and timely and important, and it made me feel
Hopefully next
safer.
time I can accept your surrender.
I can feel safer. I would rather surrender to God and the Holy Spirit in you
Oh,
than to a gay person and the devil in them. You understand? And
hey,
so
hey,
guess what?
I'm always open to have all of my mind changed, because
I
I always want to change my opinion to be in line with the facts of the matter,
That's
right?
very very noble,
So,
and I'd like
yeah.
to incline
I said that
myself.
to someone and they thought I was weird.
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
what?
They thought you were weird.
They're like, I'm just gonna keep my opinion to myself and just keep my opinion. And I'm like, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's not because movement is beautiful, and movement
Have you
involves
guys
exchange.
Yeah.
have you guys read How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan?
Mm-mm.
No, I've read the Omnivore's Dilemma. That's about mushrooms, isn't it?
It is. It was very much worth the read. I think
Okay.
you would quite enjoy it, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Alex, you might get a kick out of that one too. It was very interesting. It was. I've tested out some psychedelics at various dosages for psilocybin, and
Yeah. It's impossible to overdose on psilocybin.
it is.
Yeah. I mean, you'll change. You will be changed.
Yeah,
You can
you
change
can
yourself
you can
forever.
change your brain chemistry with it.
Um, but
You can also
you won't
intentionally
die.
change your brain chemistry with it.
You might even put yourself in, I don't know if you'd put yourself in a vegetative state, but you would really change yourself. You could really
Yeah.
fry yourself.
I don't think you can fry yourself quite as much with mushrooms as you can with like acid.
Well, yeah. Anything that people makes probably worse.
Synthetic stuff's a bit easier to
As far
fry.
as drugs are concerned, at least.
I mean, I definitely like from experience. I know that the way that I kind of understand how things in the universe work and interact with each other is different than before when I did mushrooms. Um, Not to say that like the universe itself has changed, but like my understanding of my place in it a little bit has made sense to some degree or another more after doing it. Yeah, it's an interesting stuff. But yeah, to close this out, as we approach topics that we don't necessarily see eye to eye on, it is. I was glad to see that I brought two people who were able to engage with each other with respect and fighting for clarity and to seek understanding of one another. And I think that's a really important thing to do. And I don't necessarily agree with either one of you on certain points,
It's okay.
and which is okay. And it's
I
okay
don't
for us
agree
to
with
not.
you on a lot of points either, Noah.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's all right. And that's part of the beauty of being human. And um, all three of us are Christian. I have had a interesting spiritual journey to get to where I'm at, and some of my favorite conversations I've had with people about life and God and the way that the universe is designed are with people who are not Christian. And I think it's really important to remember that to people who are not Christian, because of many of the scars and sins of the church writ large past, they have accumulated some fear towards the church. And the church has lost its place as being a hospital, especially in America, into being almost just another business in a sea of businesses. And I think it is something that would do the church and society a lot of good if they remembered to act more like a hospital. Um, Personally, I don't think that the state should really provide welfare services. I don't actually think that that's a responsibility of the state. Uh, However, I do think that that's a responsibility of the church. And I would love to see what our nation would look like if the churches were able to address welfare problems because the government is so woefully inadequate to do so. And I know that there are things or laws that get in the way of being able to do that, but I would love to see what America would look like if the church was much more concerned about how can we love our neighbors and bless them and benefit them to such an extent that whether or not the government is wanting to align itself with our values or not, our impact on society is such that it is undeniable, and that we are a force for such good for those who are genuinely needing it, and not to say that not to say that everybody isn't in need of spiritual guidance and spiritual community, and um, but there are definitely groups in this country who seem to have been largely forgotten already, despite the system that we have in place that's supposed to act as some kind of safety net. And um, I would love to see what would happen if the church stopped bickering over the wrong things and started coming together over the right things and seeing what we could do as the body of Christ working together for this country in service, not out of expectation for how do we gain political power as a religious structure. And I think that has to shift within people across this country, and I think it's beginning to. And I think people are starting to realize that the system that we live in, despite its kind of gilded lining, is oppressive and cruel at a level that is difficult to quantify. And that the way that we live and accommodate our comforts in America is something that we're going to have to reckon with if we're going to continue forward.
Negligent. It can be negligent of the sacrifices of our past, deeply negligent.
And hypocritical of the ideas that we espouse, such as freedom and being against slavery and being against abusive institutional power, and not only allowing it but promoting it around the world and within our own society for various reasons, but mostly profit. And I think as long as we have a society that is more focused on profit than the value of relationship between people in community, that we are going to continue to have fundamental societal issues as it fractures into powerful individuals who figure out how the game works, who do what they can to amass the most profit for themselves, and if they're kind about it, for as many people as they can in their wake. And I think that as we near a level of technology that is going to change the way that we interact with certain things as a species, I think that we have a responsibility to learn how this technology works and be able to implement it for the glory of the kingdom of heaven. because there are going to definitely be people who use it to pursue individual power and to benefit agendas that are darker than most people probably want to confront. And it would be a shame for all the blood that has been spilled throughout history to get us here, for it to have to continue to just endlessly spill blood with basically just wage enslavement as the future for all of humanity. I don't think that is what our purpose on this planet is. And I think that if we are able to spread the freedom of Christ, that we will be able to co-create with Christ. And Jesus says that we will do greater things than even he. And he did some pretty incredible things. And I've always wondered what it would be to look like if we had a church full of people who were not out of arrogance trying to outdo Christ, but out of, I know Christ will guide me to do greater things than he because he said so. And it would radically change the world if people were concerned with their net benefit to humanity more than their net benefit to the profit of themselves or the company that they worked for. And that, I think, can only be guided by the church. And the church has some issues that it needs to work out before it can do that as effectively as it ought to be. At least in my humble opinion.
Amen. Amen. So this has been a great episode, you guys. And that's a great closing statement, Noah. And that makes me feel covered under holy shadow. I'm not joking. There's a lot of different people in this world who have a lot of very stupid things to say. And you just said something that actually contributes some ancient, beautiful, sacred, and sanctifying values over our lives. And now we get to grow and give for what you just said. And it's not going to poison us, and it's not going to kill us, and it's not going to drive us to homosexuality or anything vile, despicable, or anti-human, because what you just said is an expression of a Christian heart, which is the most regal and royal and beautiful and sanctified and masculine thing that a man can have as a Christian heart in my eyes. So thank you for saying that ending conclusion. With that being said, guys, this has been the Reasonable Unreasonable podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. We hope to see you next week.
All right.
Yeah. Peace be with you.
Bye.
Peace.
Peace.